Chapter 864. Crane opened his eyes. That pair of indifferent eyes was currently as cold as a blade. Beside him floated many light bubbles, and inside every bubble was a figure. All of their faces revealed traces of fatigue. They had been hiding in the undercurrent region for 5 days. Protective barrier. Quickly open the protective barrier. The crew members of the large warship were still in shock. They were anxious to escape and did not open the protective barrier. What was the use of the protective barrier? If they were to be sucked into the energy vortex, the protective barrier would not be able to save them. As for encountering other attacks, they had never thought about it. The warship suddenly broke apart. The light aura of the star treasures quickly became even brighter. The energy vortex was actually controlled by the enemy. Are they looking to die? Wei Ting clenched her teeth. Without hesitation, she gathered all her remaining strength and rushed forward. But they could not blame the officers of the fleet. They had no problems with their tactics. The Shan continent's terrible terrain was the true culprit. The Shan continent was just a small and remote continent and did not possess the conditions to anchor such a large fleet. They were like fish in water, destroying the warships and reaping lives. Just at that moment, a dazzling light regiment suddenly lit up outside the window. The piercing light aura caused the entire sky to turn white, and nothing could be seen. The loud explosion caused everyone to be unable to hear anything. Everyone was dumbfounded, and their minds went blank. Bang! A cry of surprise sounded out, causing the atmosphere to become tense again. Everyone was stunned by the scene. How could a large-scale warship be so weak? Little Fool, who had been forced to go crazy by the refinement, was currently on the verge of going berserk. Every time, Bing would sigh with emotion at how good of a child he was, and would continue to destroy and exploit him. No one noticed them. The soldiers on the warship were all focused on the energy vortex. It was the order to retreat. The intense pain on their bodies caused them to wake up. Spread out. All of you spread out. Their attacks were extremely ferocious, without any intention of conserving their strength. Crane and the rest had discussed in detail before the battle, deducing all sorts of situations and how to deal with them. The situation in front of them did not exceed their expectations. Their movements were concealed and careful, borrowing the shadows of the warship. They stuck close to the bottom of the ship. The terrifying, dazzling light aura lit up again. This time, it was even more ferocious. The experienced crew members knew that the attack was coming from a few places at the same time. Their heads buzzed as if they had been punched in the head. Large battleships and other large battleships. When Go Chung Wundao seized control of the Shan continent, he immediately surveyed the surrounding terrain and naturally found the undercurrent region near the estuary. There was no doubt about the danger of the undercurrent zone. No matter how powerful a fleet was, they would have no chance of survival if they accidentally charged into the undercurrent zone. Wei Ting and the rest were also frightened by the power of the Star Treasure Bomb. Countless people woke up as if they had just woken up from a dream. They held their heads in their hands and looked as if they had seen a ghost. The fleet's plan was to be tight on the outside and loose on the inside. The sudden movement of the energy vortex caught everyone off guard. However, the real reason for such great destruction was because the battleships were too densely packed and encountered an unexpected situation that caused chaos. The destructive power of the energy whirlpool was astonishing, but its speed was naturally much slower than a warship. If the battleships were not so densely packed, most of the battleships could easily avoid the danger. The people on the remaining battleships stared dumbfoundedly at the suicidal actions of these people. No, this is impossible. Their primary target was the large warships. But after lying dormant in the undercurrent zone for 5 days, their physical strength had been greatly depleted, and the remaining physical strength was only enough for them to unleash a wave of high-intensity attacks. The battleships that survived the calamity watched as the energy vortex wreaked havoc. All of them had miserable expressions. With such a huge accident, everyone was doomed, and what awaited them was Master Go Chung Wundao's rage. Master Go Chung Wondao, who was widely known for his coldness and strictness, under his rage, how many people would lose their lives? Wei Ting Ting and the rest were the first to react, and immediately launched attacks on the medium-scale warships. Screams and exclamations sounded out. The fleet that had just calmed down once again fell into chaos. If Go Chung Wendao's fleet suffered heavy losses, Go Chung Wendao would be in an extremely dangerous situation. In the undercurrent zone 150m behind them, Wei Ting Ting released the last god gold arrow. Upon leaving the bow, it transformed into a ray of light, like a shooting star. It smashed into one of the medium-scale warships. For 5 days, they maintained their silence, and no one said a word. They were too close to the enemy. If they made any movements, they might attract the enemy's attention, and the entire plan would fail. Furthermore, the battle was not over yet. Wei Ting Ting was equally excited, but she was much more experienced than before and proficiently pulled out the god gold arrow. Crane did not give any orders. All the details have been discussed over and over again, and everyone knew what they had to do. All of them were dumbstruck. Their mouths were wide open, and they could not close them. Now, they finally understood why they needed to escape 3 kilometers away before the explosion. Seeing the warships that were destroyed by the shockwave, if they had stayed in the area, all that would be left would be a pile of minced meat. The large-scale warships were extremely sturdy, and ordinary attacks were unable to destroy them. At that time, no one knew better than Crane and the rest how sturdy the warship wreckages were. How to destroy the large-scale warships became the biggest problem they had to face. The clear Crane cry resonated throughout the battlefield. Even the explosions were unable to cover it. Using the spirit-devouring flame as the trigger, the Star Treasure self-detonation was the Star Treasure bomb. Its might was extremely astonishing and was the best weapon to use against large-scale warships. For the battle, the Southern Alliance used all of their remaining Star Treasures. A large-scale warship was engulfed by the light aura, and a spherical shockwave suddenly expanded outwards. The warships around it were like paper in front of the shockwave. The hull of the warships were forcibly shaken into many pieces. The narrow estuary caused the majority of the warships to be anchored near the Shang continent's estuary. But even the space near the estuary was extremely limited. The gigantic energy vortex occupied one side, and on the other side was the extremely dangerous undercurrent region. No one would have thought that it was just the beginning. That is Master Go Chung Wendao's warship. The battle plan was drawn up, and the powerful large-scale warships were set as the main target. Everyone suddenly realized a problem that they had overlooked. How could they destroy the large-scale warships? The Shang continent had no defenses, and without a fleet, Go Chung Wendao was like a warrior that had lost his armor. A dazzling flame blossomed from the center of the warship. Regiment after regiment of flames blossomed like beautiful flowers that blossomed in the fleet. The battle was so sudden and intense. The Honorable Marshall Continent's fleet that was not prepared at all suffered heavy losses. They crawled up frantically and looked towards the direction of the explosion, but when they saw it clearly, all of them were stunned. The surviving warships had their backs to the undercurrent region, and the warship closest to the buoy line was only 150m away. They stuck a Star Treasure to the bottom of the warship and immediately distanced themselves. According to the data given by Little Fool, they needed to rush out of 3 kilometers before it exploded. They appeared from behind the fleet like ghosts. The battlefield that was filled with smoke and raging flames rushed out like black dots. They were like birds returning to their nests, rushing towards the energy vortex. The Star Treasure bomb's effect was too good, so good that it exceeded their expectations, which meant that they had already achieved the lowest goal of the plan. With the destruction of the large-scale warships, the fleet's fighting strength had dropped by more than half. Then, an even more unbelievable scene occurred. To prevent any accidents, they had specially set up the eye-catching buoy line to mark the undercurrent region. Looking deeply at the young faces that were filled with excitement, Crane did not speak any nonsense. He unsheathed his sword and took the lead to rush towards the border of the undercurrent region. Behind him, the others followed closely. There's a sneak attack. Even with the protection of star treasures, staying in the undercurrent region for 5 days was an extreme test of willpower and strength. Crane did not know if they could survive for 5 days in the undercurrent region, but he still accepted the mission because he knew that it was the only chance to heavily injure Go Chung Wendao's fleet. The intense energy undulation immediately alerted the crew members of the fleet. After the lingering fear, they quickly became excited. For the sake of the battle, the Southern Alliance had used all of their good stuff. The God Gold arrows were useless against large-scale warships, but against medium-scale warships, they were able to cause damage. Wei Ting and the rest were already familiar with how to deal with warships. Furthermore, the complicated and chaotic environment was no different from when they were in the wreckage zone. Dazzling light auras blossomed from the fleet. All of them were large-scale warships. The snow-white light auras enveloped the entire battlefield. After a short sprint, everyone's vision suddenly became bright. Damn it, it's rushing towards us. Everyone started to wake their companions up and moved their stiff bodies. For the sake of reducing their losses, for the 5 days, they did not move at all. Go Chung Wendao's warship, the most luxurious, sturdiest, strongest with the strongest offense and the tightest defense, was left with only half of the jet black wreckage. Gigantic tongues of flames spewed out from the wreckage, burning fiercely. The few warships around it were affected and suffered severe damage. When they had decided to carry out the plan, they knew that if they succeeded, the battle would become a legend. And the enemy was the Honorable Marshall Continent, the Honorable Marshall Continent that had a blood feud with them. To use such a legendary method to heavily injure their enemy, there was nothing more exciting than that. When the explosions outside came out, everyone who was already numb gradually regained their vigor, and their stiff faces became excited. It was the most crucial battle. The energy vortex revealed a crack that was roughly 1 kilometer wide, and the enemies that had escaped from the battlefield all flew into the crack. When the last enemy flew into the crack closed up. Crane and the rest managed to sneak into the bottom of the large-scale warship. The gigantic hull of the large-scale warship cast a deep shadow, giving them the best cover. It was their secret weapon, the Star Treasure Bomb. Everyone fell into fear, and most of them wanted to cry, but had no tears. However, everyone's faces were filled with excitement. What entered their vision were many gigantic warships. They looked to be in a mess, without any formation to speak of. The flames that blossomed from time to time, the terrifying figures in the energy vortex, became the best background. Jing Hao had launched his attack. Wei Ting bit her lips. Her hands were trembling slightly due to overexertion. Her expression was filled with unwillingness. If I had more time. The Star Treasure suddenly released a faint flame. It was the spirit-devouring flame. The Star Treasure immediately became bright and started to frantically absorb the energy around it. Before they could react, the body of the warship beneath them suddenly trembled. They were caught off guard and were flung out, smashing onto the wall. The one who solved the problem was Little Fool. Chapter 865. At that moment, all the answers were revealed. The Southern Alliance did not prepare any path of retreat. They did not have any reinforcements. Their goal was to rush into the undercurrent region. All of the military generals of the Honorable Marshall Continent had ashen faces, their eyes spewing fire. The destructive power of the energy vortex was astonishing, but its speed was much slower than a warship. Coupled with its huge size, it was exceptionally easy to aim. For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He seemed to see countless killing intents, but he couldn't grasp them. Too slow. The soldier's voice trembled. Should we fight back? When the last fragment disappeared, all the surviving warships became alert. They knew that the enemy was going to retreat. They can help us divert the Southern Alliance's attention. We only have one mission. Before Moxian and Xiu Su Hua are exhausted, we need to find the passage. If we find it, we win. If we can't find it, we'll all die together. Up until now, everyone who was still alive had a ball of anger in their hearts. Right now, they only wanted to vent this ball of anger. Maybe the Southern Alliance had arranged for reinforcements along the way, but so what? When was the last time he was in such a sorry state? The large siege ships had been destroyed. Cliff could even roughly guess what the other party would do next: surround them and attack the reinforcements. But even if he knew, he couldn't do anything about it. This was an overt plot. They were in enemy territory and had a long supply line. Whether it was supplies or reinforcements, the price was huge. On the other hand, the other party's entire population was a soldier, and they had all the advantages. Too vexing and too aggrieved. The battlefield regained its tranquility. On the surviving warships, be it the soldiers or officers, all of them seemed to have lost all their strength. They sat on the ground, looking defeated. What a terrifying fellow. The Knight of Light has been killed. However, only 30% of the medium-sized warships remained. When Go Chung Wendao rushed over, seeing the sparse warships, his face immediately became ashen, his cheeks twitched, and the rage in his eyes throbbed like flames. Everyone who was familiar with him knew that he was going to kill someone. Soon, he was no longer smiling bitterly, but his mouth was filled with bitterness. What else is there to burn? Throw it in. Counterattack. Of course, he had to counterattack. Putting aside the shock and pain in his heart, Cliff began to think about how such a heavy loss would affect the situation of the war. To dare to give up on the Shan continent, it was truly a decisiveness worthy of praise. From the start of this battle, the other side began to gain the strategic initiative. Wait a minute. The Southern Alliance's attack was too ruthless. Everyone on the Radiant Marshal warship, who was prepared to fight to the death, was dumbstruck. Inside the Western Trader's warehouse, the courtyard was ablaze. Everyone was continuously removing all sorts of flammable items and throwing them into the fire. Utter defeat. The energy whirlpool slowly swept through the wreckage. The floating debris and the hull of the ship disappeared without a trace. It was like a beast that had eaten and drunk its fill, looking lazy. The fire isn't big enough. One more round. The undercurrent area? Yes. Cliff's heart skipped a beat. I will immediately request for reinforcements from the Holy Cathedral. These incomparably proud generals had already thrown their personal honor and disgrace to the back of their minds. In the face of such humiliation, life and death were meaningless. They could only hope to regain some of their dignity. In the night, Blue Wind City was in chaos, where the Western Trader's encampment was ablaze. The blazing flames lit up the sky. Even from afar, one could feel the ferocity of the fire. The energy whirlpool was a secret weapon, and they were extremely familiar with the group that ambushed them. They were their old opponents in the wreckage. Regardless of who it was, the Southern Alliance would not treat them as sacrificial pawns, so they would definitely retreat. Everyone's opinion was unanimous. They had to get rid of the energy whirlpool. Whether it was to wash away the humiliation or for the safety of the supply line, no matter what, they had to get rid of the energy whirlpool. The remaining captains were in an intense discussion. But what surprised them was that Go Chung Wendao became quiet. The rage in his eyes dimmed down, and a bitter smile blossomed on his face. But they could only watch with their eyes wide open. There was nothing they could do. They could only wait for the enemy to retreat, wait for them to explode. They will definitely retreat. They quickly came up with a plan. The speed of the warships was much faster than the energy whirlpool and more agile. The energy whirlpool will definitely not be able to escape. Damn it! Without the protection of the warships, the Shan continent was exposed to the Southern Alliance and could be attacked at any time. The Shan continent was small and did not have any strategic depth, and more importantly, Temple would definitely not allow them to leave the Shan continent. The only thing they could do was to defend and seek reinforcements. Cliff could not help but laugh bitterly. If even the Western traders can't defend against it, how can they even have the heart to fight back? Suddenly, Cliff had some suspicions. Is giving up on the Shan continent intentional? A cold, intense surfaced in his heart, if that is truly the case. Follow it, and when it retreats, we will kill it. The Southern Alliance is actually able to control the energy whirlpool. Such a secret weapon is truly a huge threat. The fleet suffered a devastating blow, All of the large-scale warships were destroyed, 90% of the small-scale warships were destroyed, and only a few medium-scale warships were left. Screams and shouts filled the ears, spreading out at an astonishing speed in the night, causing the various construction sites to explode. Blue Wind City was currently a gigantic construction site. For the sake of rebuilding Blue Wind City, the Western traders had gathered all of the reputable trading organizations in the Western region. The bandits are here. Go Chung Wondao, who was silent for a long time, spat out 3 words with difficulty. Seek reinforcements. The direction the energy whirlpool is moving in. The officers finally calmed down. The military generals of the Honorable Marshall Continent did not need to worry about their tactics. And for all of them to be able to become Go Chung Wondao's subordinates, all of them were not weak. Especially the captains of the warships. All of them were experienced military generals with high standards. After a series of intense and unconventional attacks, they gradually reacted. The enemy wants to kill us all. Unknowingly, the battle had fallen into the enemy's rhythm. Cliff knew that even if the fleet was not attacked, and they were not in such a terrible situation, but the battle would still slowly fall into the enemy's rhythm. Be careful, don't burn the warehouse. The best way was to take the initiative to retreat from the Shan continent and regain the strategic space. But he knew that Temple would definitely not agree. The true target of the southern expedition was the Shan continent. Half of the energy whirlpool had already entered the undercurrent region. The outer layer of the energy whirlpool had an additional layer of black barrier, which was spinning at high speed. This is a huge humiliation. They then thought about it. The enemy's sneak attack came from the undercurrent region. The enemy has been lying in ambush in the undercurrent region for at least 5 days. They have a way to survive in the undercurrent region. They had lost the initiative in their strategy. The only thing they had to worry about was the explosion of the energy whirlpool, which would cause the Shan continent to be destroyed. Go Chung Wondao and the 3 great generals were all in the Shan continent, and if the energy whirlpool exploded there, the Shan continent would not be spared. Even if the Shan continent was safe and sound, if the estuary was destroyed, the situation would be equally terrible. Cliff could not help but feel a sense of respect towards the commander of the Southern Alliance, whom he had never met before. If not for the fleet being attacked, they would never have thought that the Shan continent was abandoned by the enemy. And even Master Go Chung Wondao was deceived. It was truly powerful. The surviving officers regained their senses from a shock. Their eyes suddenly filled with blood veins. When have we ever suffered such a huge loss? In the history of the Honorable Marshall Continent, it was the first time that such a large-scale fleet was destroyed. The energy whirlpool brought along a scalp-numbing roar as it smashed towards them. The Southern Alliance was like their nemesis since the start of the battle. Other than the slight advantage they had over the Southern Alliance in the beginning, the situation had never happened again. The Southern Alliance's resistance became more and more tenacious, and the standards of the enemy's military generals became higher and higher, causing the Honorable Marshall Continent's losses to increase. However, a situation like this where the entire fleet was almost annihilated was unprecedented. In the battlefield, the most tragic thing was not that the enemy had the absolute advantage and you could only fight with your life on the line, but that the enemy did not even give you the chance to fight, and you would be completely defeated. When the energy whirlpool pounced over, the surviving warships quickly dodged like nimble fishes. To avoid being sucked in by the energy whirlpool, they maintained a distance. They did not even take the initiative to occupy the direction where the energy whirlpool retreated to prevent the energy whirlpool from being unable to retreat and choosing to perish together. Cliff knew that his master had truly suffered a huge blow. Go Chung Wondao had become famous at a young age. His military achievements were illustrious, although he had lost before, but his fighting strength was extremely strong, and even if he lost, the one in a difficult situation would be the enemy. Cliff sighed. He even hoped that he did not understand. Other than the arrangements that could be seen, the enemy definitely had other plans, just that he could not understand their intentions. They had rich battle experience and were previously caught unprepared, adding that they lacked a unified command. But now that they were prepared to die, They did not have many misgivings and quickly found the weakness of the energy whirlpool. But when they saw the energy whirlpool, like a grinder, devouring everything in the wreckage of the warships, everyone's eyes turned red once again. They were so angry that they were about to pop out. There were many survivors in the wreckage of the warships. But now, regardless of whether it was the warships, the corpses, or the survivors, they were all being devoured by the energy whirlpool. Go Chung Wendao's voice was like the winter wind, causing everyone's entire body to turn cold. Cliff was startled. He immediately understood something, and his face turned pale white. Inside the warehouse, young Lad Tang heard everyone's shouts in the courtyard and looked at the mountains of warehouses in front of him. He was dumbstruck. Their situation had become difficult. Cliff never thought that after they took over the Shan continent, their situation would become more and more difficult. They watched helplessly as the energy vortex entered the undercurrent area and disappeared. No! Go Chung Wendao's voice seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. It was extremely cold. Other than Temple, there's still Mo Xen and Qiu Su Hua. Tell them to rush to the Shan continent at full speed. The darkness and flames caused the fear in the depths of their hearts to transform into instincts, urging them to escape frantically. Everyone did not delay for time and quickly made their decision. All of the warships that had the determination to die had already disregarded life and death. They only wanted to fight without caring about anything else. To die under the gunfire and smoke, to die in the midst of fighting with the enemy, was far more satisfying than dying without even knowing why. Chapter 866. The Bronze Grade Spirit General card was of a low grade. The bronze door of the spirit chamber flashed, and a spirit general appeared in front of Tang Tian. Pai Pa was surprised. Tang Tian then tried to use it to move things and realized that its strength was not bad and was immediately satisfied. Qiu Su Huan knew that if this continued, the situation would only become worse. In just 3 hours, they had emptied the entire warehouse. The spirit chamber was still the same. The simple and crude bronze door stood there quietly. He only had one mission, and that was to kill Moxin. The large amount of resources from a new world had profoundly changed the two worlds of Heaven's Road and Sacred Saint Galaxy. The next step was extremely crucial, and if he missed it, it would be impossible for him to obtain such an opportunity again. He had tried using all sorts of methods to deal with Baiyu. Even if he had to suffer some losses, he was willing. Who knew that Baiyu was too crafty and slippery every time he would swallow the bait and spit out the hook? There were a few times when he was about to succeed, but every time he would slip away at the last moment. Baiyu's high standard made Qiu Su Hua admire him, and he even thought of recruiting Baiyu to be his subordinate after winning the battle. When he regained his senses, he immediately felt an intense fear. Now it was time to test him. Tang Tian's eyes released a green light. Like a famished wolf, he stared at the mountain of resources in front of him. No one would believe that Go Chung Wendao would fail so miserably. Hearing the explosions behind him getting further and further away, and seeing the figures disappearing out of the window, Qiu Su Hua could no longer hold it in, and his tears fell silently. On the surface, it looked like a large army of warships had been destroyed, but the effect it had on the entire battle was fundamental. Yaya, who had always been in a daze upon seeing Tang Tian, became overjoyed and babbled non-stop, causing Tang Tian to feel guilty, as though he had forgotten about him for too long. When Tang Tian explained everything to Yaya, Yaya patted his chest loudly and then pulled out his mechanical beast army. Sima Xiao had traveled with Tang Tian for a long time, but he still felt that it was hard to understand the ignorant and naive young man. Whether it was greed or calmness, they were both so real, but the transformation was so sudden. After a while, he suddenly realized that the appearance of the spirit generals would have a profound effect on the two worlds. Previously, although Tang Tian had the Stargate that connected the two worlds, his transportation ability was extremely limited. It was like a thin blood vessel that could only transport a limited amount of resources. With the appearance of all these spirit generals, It meant that the blood transfusion tube had expanded by 100 or even 1,000 times, and the amount of resources that could be transported between the two worlds had become extremely astonishing. Tang Tian, whose eyes were glowing with a green light, stared blankly at the dazzling high-grade materials in the warehouse like a statue. At first, Xie Yuan had some doubts about this quest, but he didn't ask much. Instead, he carried out seriously. Until yesterday, when the news of Go Chung Wendao's fleet being destroyed came, he finally realized. We don't have much time, Sima Xiao reminded. The quantity was too astonishing, and not many people could maintain their calm in front of such wealth. Just the blood tear gems alone, there were 7 boxes, and its value far exceeded the warehouse that they had plundered previously. A large number of materials rich in St. Crystal were piled up into a dazzling hill. Thus, when Tang Tian brought the majestic mechanical beasts and spirit generals back to the Western trader's warehouse, everyone was dumbstruck. Xie Yuan was extremely busy, but the upcoming battle made him excited. It also meant that the two worlds were about to truly merge. The 07 army barracks that he had not visited for a long time was still the same, with the vicissitudes of time and desolation. The Western traders needed to construct an even more majestic Blue Wind City, and required even more high-grade materials. Unable to give up on the wealth, pressed for time, Tang Tian seemed to have fallen into a desperate situation. His pitiful intelligence was currently operating frantically. That's right, he had the idea of the spirit generals. I have no other choice. Tang Tian's voice broke Sima Zhao's train of thought, and he could not help but look at Tang Tian. His eyes are so clear. Where is the greedy green wolf that looked like a greedy wolf? Qiu Su Hua stared at Wei Yu for a long time, his heart filled with sorrow before the battle. Who would have thought that the battle would be so intense? Out of the 3 generals under him, Feng Yunman had already been sacrificed, and now, with the addition of Wei Yu, only Ziche Jia Jing was left. There is strength in numbers. Sima Xiao held onto the stupefied Carl and followed closely behind. So it was like that. Tang Tian thought about Tang Yi and Tang Chou, and his mouth unknowingly blossomed into a smile. Time was of the essence. He did not have the time to reminisce, but moved quickly and used the bronze-grade spirit cards in the spirit hall. Seeing the warehouse that was so clean that not even a piece of paper was left, as though there was a plague of locusts, everyone could not help but tremble. Master is too ruthless. Ursa Major Constellation strength was no longer the same as it was in the past, with saints representing the high-end fighting strength, and martial artists who trained in the zero-energy bodies firmly held the core strength of Ursa Major Constellation. The need for spirit cards had drastically decreased, and the warehouse was filled with large amounts of spirit cards. He was completely in awe of Master Bing and could not understand how the Master managed to do it. Sima Xiao suddenly felt that he was rather fortunate to be able to personally witness such a historical moment. They had to use all methods to snipe Mo-Xin and delay Mo-Xin's retreat. Wei Yu led his troops and rushed out. The majority of the troops took the chance to break free and quickly escaped. Tang Tian had never thought of giving up on the materials. Although Tang Tian was a tyrant at times, but to give up on so much wealth was definitely not his style. He knew how important the following plan was, but he knew even more clearly that upon starting the following plan, they would never be able to return to Blue Wind City. His entire body was brimming with fighting spirit. Sima Xiao was dumbstruck. Control. I must definitely control myself, Sima Xiao muttered in his heart. To him, the wealth in front of him could make anyone go crazy, but the initiative and strategy was even more precious. This godlike young lad, who has created so many miracles, must definitely be able to differentiate the severity of the situation. Prepare to move out. The intense battle lit up the sea of energy. Bai Yu was like a dog-skin plaster, thinking of all ways to pester him. Both parties had crossed swords countless of times, and were extremely familiar with each other. Compared to the aged Sacred Pagoda army, Bai Yu was extremely agile, causing Qiu Su Hua to have a bigger headache. 3 Spirit City. Tang Tian's sudden appearance immediately made Pai Pa anxious. She thought that something had happened. But what she did not expect was that Tang Tian needed spirit cards. After quickly replenishing his army, he received a secret mission and quietly left the Southern Alliance. Tang Tian tried to command the spirit general. Its movements were rather stiff, and its reaction was slow. It could only accept some simple commands. Gocheng Wendao saw that they were gradually losing the initiative, and thus personally requested for help from Qiu Su Hua. Qiu Su Hua did not hesitate, and immediately set off towards the Shang continent. But Baiyu was like a dog skin plaster. He pounced forward frantically and continued to pester them, causing the fleet's speed to drop. After serving as the recruitment ambassador for a period of time, he had achieved great results, but he was not used to living a life far away from the battlefield. Fortunately, Bing would definitely not throw such an outstanding military general to the back and not care about him. Wei Yu, Qiu Su Hua's left and right arm, had a resolute expression. The honorable martial continent would never have thought that the goal that they had fought for generations at this moment, would be quietly opened by the hands of a young man. What Tang Tian and the rest did not know was that although the people of the Sacred Saint Galaxy did not refine out Saint Crystals, they did not know nothing about them. Materials that were rich in Saint Crystals would usually display extremely bright properties, and most of these materials were high-grade materials. And in the core regions of the cities, the keels of the warships, and other crucial regions, high-grade materials were used in large amounts. All of the warships were almost completely wiped out. The flames in the courtyard lit up the sky, and also lit up Sima Zhao's face of shock. Looking at the empty warehouse and the dumbfounded crowd, he couldn't help but laugh. Even Tang Tian himself did not realize that in the night where the flames soared to the sky, a brand new era had quietly begun. Qiu Su Hua stared out of the window, seemingly in a daze. Sima Xiao knew the value of Saint Crystals. With so many high-grade materials, the amount of Saint Crystals contained would cause anyone to go crazy. But, according to the plan, they did not have much time left. What made Pai Pa even more surprised was that Tang Tian actually chose the lowest grade spirit card, the bronze grade spirit card. A torch was thrown into the empty warehouse, and the warehouse immediately turned into a sea of flames. Spirit card? Just as Sima Xiao was about to persuade him again, Tang Tian suddenly slapped his head. His eyes lit up. "I have an idea." Qiu Su Hua could not forget the disbelief he felt when he received Gocheng Wendao's request for help. He could not believe his own eyes. He was extremely clear of Gocheng Wendao's standard. The 5 great generals all had different styles, but their standards were all about the same. Other than producing a batch of bronze grade spirit generals, Tang Tian even brought Yaya over. Luckily, although Qiu Su Hua could not do anything to Baiyu similarly could not do anything to Qiu Su Hua, and the two of them maintained a strange tacit understanding. But the request for help was personally sent by Gocheng Wendao, and he explained the cause and effect of their failure in detail. After reading it, Qiu Su Hua's mind was in a daze, and only regained his senses after an hour. For the sake of rebuilding Blue Wind City, the Western traders had prepared a large amount of resources to rebuild a city, and furthermore one that was even more majestic than Blue Wind City. The amount of resources required was astronomical, and no one expected for Tang Tian to benefit from it. "I need someone to cover my back," Qiu Su Hua said solemnly, his gaze sweeping across the generals. He was slightly worried that Tang Tian would be delayed because of the wealth. What a joke! Because it was a bronze grade spirit card, the Spirit Hall transformed it into the lowest grade spirit general. Its aura was extremely weak. Its face seemed to be shrouded in mist. It did not have a physical body, but its limbs were much more congealed. But this strange tacit understanding was broken after receiving Gocheng Wendao's request for help. Truly an unfathomable fellow. He did not understand why the situation had unknowingly become so terrible. "Let's go." Tang Tian soared into the sky. "This subordinate is willing to go." A sturdy-looking man stepped out. He did not pick anyone. It was a mission of certain death, and there was almost no chance of survival. But he had no other choice. If they could not break free from Bayou, they would not be able to reinforce the Shan continent in time. The longer they dragged on, the more passive they would be. Out of all of them, the only one who could maintain his composure in front of the astonishing wealth was the Scorpio King. The last time Tang Tian emptied out the warehouse, he had spent an entire night, and compared to the resources in front of him, the amount of resources in the warehouse was negligible. For the Western traders to transport so many resources here, they'd spent countless manpower and resources, and for them to move all of them was undoubtedly a gigantic task. Chapter 867. Unknowingly, he had already reached a height that was previously unimaginable. When he received Gocheng Wendao's request for help, his initial advantage became a huge disadvantage. After thinking of the strategy, Xie Yuan marked all the possible routes that Moxin could take to the Shan continent. He personally went to the various continents to persuade them and organized the local armies to build fortifications. The sea of energy was vast and boundless. Other than those that had already been opened up, there were still many regions that no one had set foot on. However, these unfamiliar areas were filled with unknown dangers. This was the fourth battle since the day before yesterday. The intensity of the battle was not high, and the opponent's fighting spirit did not seem to be tenacious. They were only resisting with the help of the fortifications. Most of the battle was spent on destroying the fortifications. When the defensive structure collapsed, the enemy army scattered. It was obvious that they were just a group of mobs. He was now the most famous military general in the southern region. In the southern region, many people did not know who the highest commander of the Southern Alliance was, but there was no one who did not know of Xie Yuan's success and fame did not cause him to lose himself. The life and death battle in the Ocean Guardian stronghold had left an unerasable mark in his heart. Life and death, so tragic, so cruel. He survived, but so many of his companions were forever separated, and it was the greatest loss the Swift Army had ever suffered since its formation. But continuously encountering mobs still aroused Moxin's vigilance. Moxin stared at the battlefield that had just ended as a dark cloud flashed across her heart. Some continents even doubled the number of fortifications Xie Yuan had given them. Abundant manpower and material resources allowed the entire plan to be carried out quickly. Previously, although Xie Yuan did not reject the recruitment ambassador, he still had some resentment in his heart. He was an introverted person who liked to be quiet. He didn't really like things like standing in front of the stage. However, as a soldier, he had to obey orders unconditionally, so he worked hard to do a better job. He had personally forced Moxin to such a state. The various continents of the southern region were all cheering. In their eyes, Moxin was dead for sure. After encountering the 15th fortification, Moxin's army suddenly changed direction. Moxin decided to take a different path. Although she would have to take a detour, when she thought about the densely packed fortifications that made people despair, taking a detour would save more time. Xie Yuan did not know whether he had completed the mission or not. Moxin's army had no choice but to spend a lot of time to dismantle it. Xie Yuan calmed himself down. He wasn't too happy, but he wasn't too depressed either. The other party was not a mediocre fighter. On the contrary, he was one of the few famous generals in the world. He had his own dignity and courage. But when that familiar fortification once again entered Moxin's field of vision, it was as if Moxin was struck by lightning, his entire person dumbstruck. The affluence of the southern region was now on full display. Xie Yuan's crazy plan had received the complete support of all the continents. However, he had already done all he could and had done everything he could. If his swift army was unscathed, he would definitely take the chance to tail the enemy and look for an opportunity. The current swift army was not strong enough to complete such a difficult mission. His initial mission was to attract the southern region's attention and prevent the southern region's power from converging towards the Southern Alliance. He had accomplished his mission quite successfully. He was invincible, and no one could stop him. He had penetrated deep into the heart of the southern mountain range, causing great unease in the southern mountain range. He had attracted the attention of the entire southern mountain range. To gain the trust of so many continents' local armies was not an easy task, but Xie Yuan did it. Just based on this alone, Xie Yuan was quite amazing. Such a simple and crude method of accumulating numbers. Mo Xin suddenly realized that he actually did not have any good ideas. Even though he did not like the recruitment work, he still gave it his all, and his footprints covered every single recruitment point. Being pragmatic and taciturn did not lower his prestige, but instead allowed him to gain even more praise. The initially empty waterway was now filled with densely packed fortifications, becoming an extremely strange scenery. When Xie Yuan received the news, he could not help but feel respect for Mo Xin. In such a situation, to make such a choice required immense courage and responsibility. To use his own life to gamble for a chance to change the situation. Such a commander was worthy of respect. Mo Xin had no choice but to arrange for a few people to watch over them, and their speed of advancement became even slower. But Mo Xin knew that he had no other choice. Mo Xin could never imagine how crazy Xie Yuan was. The grade of the fortifications were not high, and looked to be crudely made. It was obvious that the enemy had rushed it in a short period of time. The sturdiness of these fortifications, however, was far more trustworthy than they appeared to be. The rest could only be left to the heavens. After encountering the 8th fortification, Mo Xin completely understood Xie Yuan's intentions. Mo Xin laughed at himself. At such a time, what need was there for him to care about himself? After regaining his senses, Mo Xin ordered his army to continue advancing in disbelief. After encountering 4 identical fortifications in a row, he completely despaired. Furthermore, the crudely made yet sturdy fortifications made Mo Xin think of a man, Xie Yuan. The densely packed fortifications on the waterway caused Mo Xin to be in despair. It was already impossible to return through the waterway. Xie Yuan's move was truly unsolvable. With such a pressing time, with such speed, they would not be able to reach the Shan continent even next year. Deep into the center of the southern region, the return journey seemed to be extremely long. But he had no other choice and could only give the order to retreat. And the distance between Mo Xion's position and the Shan continent was extremely far, as though they had to traverse half of the southern region, causing him to be in despair. Mo Xion's army deviated from the waterway and disappeared into the endless darkness. There was only one way in front of Mo Xion to avoid the waterway. He was silent, digesting and working hard. On their path, there were many more fortifications. Every fortification had become a sniping point, but he could see the light of victory. Xie Yuan's reputation had played an extremely crucial role. If the local armies were to risk their lives, they would definitely not be willing. But it was just building fortifications and borrowing the fortifications to defend. Once the fortifications were breached, they could freely choose to retreat, and the local armies were extremely willing. His gaze regained clarity. The various continents of the southern region hated the honorable martial continent from the bottom of their hearts. They did not have the courage to directly go to the front lines, but they only needed to spend some money to make the honorable martial continent suffer. So what was there to hesitate about? That's right, it was time. Mo Xion had to admit that Xie Yuan was definitely a famous general. The plan looked simple, but it required the commander to have a convincing reputation and strong organizational capabilities. An entire plan involved too many armies. He guessed that the Southern Alliance would definitely obstruct them from supporting Gocheng Wendao, so when they encountered resistance, he was not surprised. But in such a short period of time, they had encountered 4 battles consecutively, and all of them were the same, causing him to feel uneasy. Truly a powerful man, Mo Xion immediately felt the passion of the various continents of the southern region. Man proposes, God disposes, everything that needs to be done has been done. Xie Yuan thought of an extremely brazen idea. Some of the continents even started to bet on whose house Mo Xion would pass by. And the continents that had their fortifications destroyed by Mo Xion were even more pleased with themselves, and had extremely proud looks on their faces. The continents that Moxian had yet to visit took the chance to build more fortifications, as though they wanted to block the waterways. One might be a coincidence, but 4 was definitely not a coincidence. Xieyuan wanted to use the method of fencing, using the fortifications and the local armies of the nearby continents to slow down their footsteps. The fortifications were unable to stop them from retreating, but it would greatly waste their time. After admiring Xieyuan, Moxian's heart started to ache. This road is also fenced. Until now, when Xieyuan's guess was proven, everyone's passion was ignited. His army would be safe and sound if they traveled the waterways, but by the time they arrived, it would be too late. If they did not travel the waterways, the army would face countless of unknown dangers, but there was a possibility of obtaining reinforcements. Xieyuan had already proven how proficient he was in constructing fortifications in the Ocean Guardian stronghold, and in terms of designing fortifications, he had the highest standard. How to delay Moxian's reinforcements was something that Xieyuan had always been thinking about. Although the swift army had been replenished, and the quality of the new recruits were extremely high, but to form a fighting strength, they still required time. Why are there also? The standard of the armies stationed in the fortifications were rather average, and different fortifications had different armies, so Moxian judged that they should be the local armies of the nearby continents. These armies only had one mission, and that was to rely on the fortifications to defend. As long as the fortifications were destroyed, they would not resist at all and escape. They were even sure that Moxian's army did not have the time to chase after them, and swaggered around like a group of tourists. Every opening of a waterway was exchanged with the blood of countless of their ancestors. There were very few new waterways now, because the price of opening them was too high. The various continents of the southern region all praised and respected this practical and simple famous general. The willpower of the local armies to resist became even more tenacious. Even if the fortifications were destroyed, the local armies that had previously scattered actually ran far away to guard, to see if they could take advantage of the situation. What Moxian did not know was that when he started to retreat and consecutively broke through a few fortifications, the entire southern region was in an uproar. Initially, everyone was skeptical of Xieyuan's plan. Will Moxian retreat? I can't see any signs of it. But due to their trust and respect for Xieyuan, they still completed the construction. Xieyuan's mission also benefited a lot from it. Xieyuan had practically maximized his advantage. If the quality of the army was not enough, he would use the quantity of the army. If the strength of the army was not enough, he would use the fortifications. If I cannot rely on the swift army, how can I complete the mission? How much is such a grade of fortifications worth? Chapter 868. Sacred Son Charles was in charge of the reconstruction of Blue Wind City. If anything happened, Sacred Son Charles would lose face, and the two of them would be in trouble. In many people's eyes, they were 100% loyal to Sacred Son Charles. Tang Tian had already received the latest report from Bing. Gocheng Wendao's fleet had suffered heavy losses, and Moxian was forced into an unfamiliar sea. Chiu Hua had cut off his arm, causing Temple's military strength to become tense. And Tang Tian's mission was to make Temple's tense military strength even more tense. That way, Temple would expose its soft underbelly and give Tang Tian the opportunity to kill them. All of the guards' eyes were bloodshot. They were stunned by the scene in front of them. After a short moment of silence, the soldiers had completely lost all reason and pounced forward. Lance was speechless. Compared to the Gold Continent bandits, the Sin Domain was much more dangerous. Lance's mind was slightly roused. He sat up. I have some guesses. Magatama, who was like a ghost, was also extremely efficient. In the blink of an eye, corpses were strewn all over the place. What war? We don't need to fight, and we have money. How many people are drooling over us? Norman disagreed. Tang Tian firmly locked on a lance. At such a close distance, he would definitely not fail. The Sin Domain's secret operation has already begun. The scalp-numbing sound came out. It was the sound of the bones in their bodies shattering. Do cannon fodder only have to risk their lives? The bitter smile on Norman's face became even denser. Kill them. Norman's pupils constricted. Sin domain. For example, sin domain. Lance snapped his fingers. The Western traders colluded with the enemy. Our days are truly too good. In the past, who would have thought that there would be a day where we would be so rich? Norman sighed. After the battle ended, Tang Tian was still in disbelief. A powerful army was destroyed just like that. Bang! Not good. Do what we have to do, Lance said indifferently. If not, why would Sacred Son Charles treat us so well? I think he has already guessed it. Norman, there is no such thing as love without reason in this world. We need to help him solve this huge problem. If not, our good days will come to an end. Carl screamed from afar. Master, save us! Carl! And the others landed in front of him. Carl's expression was a little stiff, as if he hadn't recovered from the attack. Norman replied with Lance's words. The battlefield is the home of a general. Of course he knew about Sin Domain. If one were to speak of the Honorable Marshall Continent's history of unifying the Western region, it would most probably be the Sin Domain. In truth, the Honorable Marshall Continent held different stances towards the Sin Domain system. Many people thought that such losers should be killed to prevent future troubles, and that there was no need for the Sin Domain to cover their ears and steal the bell. They first appeared in the White Fields continent. You know that it is very close to the entrance of the Sin Domain. Lance's expression became serious. It has always been like this. Lance's expression was calm. Norman thought about Blue Wind City, and his face became ugly. If something happens to Blue Wind City, we will also be in trouble. The entire process happened in an instant. Before Lance's guards could react, their two leaders were already dead. Lance had a satisfied look on his face. Now was the time when he was proud of his success. Sacred Son Charles's favor had caused his market to soar. This could be seen from the amount of gifts that the Western traders had sent over. The battlefield is the home of a general, Norman. Lance reminded, you need to be more ambitious. Although it would never be as easy as the previous battle, but fighting to one's heart's content was still Tang Tian's favorite. Guess. Norman was startled. They are monsters. Chie reminded Tang Tian. The Sin Domain had only disappeared for a few hundred years, and their influence in the land would not disappear so easily. They were once the owners of the land, and as long as they appeared, Temple's mental state would definitely be stretched taut. Tang Tian and the rest did not chase after them. Yes, his subordinate immediately replied and turned to leave. Carl, you dare betray Temple. But to be able to kill Lance and Norman, everyone was extremely satisfied. Suddenly, a subordinate rushed in to report. Master, the Western traders have been ambushed. Blue Wind City is in flames. This is just the beginning. If both parties were to face off, it would be extremely difficult to defeat Lance's army. To any army, the commander was the soul, and losing the commander was a devastating blow to the army. The Sacred Saint Galaxy's army dominance emphasized on the military general's ability to command. Regardless of whether it was the military general or the soldiers, they did not emphasize on individual strength. In his eyes, although the Western traders were strong, but they could not be compared to a proper army. It was only because they did not meet any tough opponents that they could flaunt their strength, but upon meeting a truly powerful opponent, they would naturally reveal their true colors. On the contrary, the Honorable Marshal Banner of Knights were the real deal, and every single one of them were experts. This is a trap. You seem to be confident. Norman glanced at Lance. Monster. Lance shrugged his shoulders. That's right. He was like an extremely heavy wild beast, fiercely crashing into Lance's embrace. Lance tried to react, but his movements were as slow as a tortoise in front of Tang Tian. Tang Tian did not give the soldiers the chance to organize themselves. As long as he noticed any soldiers or officers gathering, he would kill them without hesitation. At such a close distance, the might of the army could not be unleashed at all, and they were constantly being scattered by Tang Tian, causing chaos. Oliver was escorted to Temple, where Lance's army was the only intact army in the Western region. With Lance's army disbanded, it meant that the Honorable Marshall Continent's Western region was completely empty. Tang Tian did not have any fear. With Lance's death, the soldiers were like lambs to him. He did not retreat, but instead advanced. Like an arrow, he rushed into the crowd. He did not use any fancy techniques, but his terrifying strength made him the strongest killing machine. As long as he touched them, they would either die or be injured. Before he finished speaking, Lance's eyes blurred. A guard beside Carl suddenly pounced towards him. But, regardless of what stance they had towards the Sin Domain, the higher-ups of the Honorable Martial Continent knew that the Sin Domain would forever be their enemy. Norman's face became ugly. Damn it, where's the army stationed at the Sin Door? What we have now is already very promising, Norman advised Lance. Don't think about fighting all day, since you can't go to the Shan continent. We need to finish our own work first. Sacred Son Charles gave us the task of investigating. We cannot mess it up. Sima Xiao felt that Carl still had some value, and that it would be a pity for him to die. I hope so. Norman still had a bitter look on his face, and did not relax because of Lance's words. He initially wanted to take advantage of the situation, but who knew that he would bump into a hard bone? Tang Tian looked at Sima Xiao. Magatama's bewitching ability was an unexpected surprise. Sima Xiao looked at Carl's corpse unwillingly. What a pity. Temple would definitely not sit by and watch the Sin Domain rise again, and sending more troops became their only choice. We were ambushed. Seeing that their general was killed, the soldiers erupted with blood and madness, causing Tang Tian and Sima Xiao to feel an immense pressure. And it was at that time that Carl was torn to shreds by the berserk soldiers. Lance and Norman looked at each other. That is another terrible news. Lance revealed a bitter smile. Up till now, we have not received any news from them. The Whitefields continent is in such a mess, but they seem to be asleep. Don't you think it is strange? Before flying far, the scouts discovered Carl in a terrible state. He only had a few bodyguards by his side. All of them were covered in blood. It was obvious that they had gone through a bitter battle. Norman immediately said, "Send people to investigate." That was why Norman was so anxious when Lance mentioned the Sin Domain. An enemy that will not rest until one side is dead. Lieutenant General Oliver was convicted, and Lance became the most authoritative person in the Western region. Thus, the Western traders naturally had to curry favor with him. Not only did Lance not reject the Western traders, he even tried to rope them in. Lance's face changed. There's an assassin. Tang Tian was filled with anticipation for the upcoming battle. So tragic. Lance mumbled in a low voice, but he immediately put on a serious expression. Carl, what's going on? Lance clicked his tongue. What grudge do the Gold Continent bandits have with the Western traders? They will not rest until one side is dead. Did Carl offend anyone? No. I'm just full of optimism. Lance laughed out loud. Relax, Norman. This is the Honorable Martial Continent. What can the Sin Domain, who are rotting in the trash heap of history, do? This became the signal for the army to collapse, and more soldiers started to escape. He knew that he had made a fatal mistake. He actually allowed someone to charge in front of him. To a military general, to allow an assassin to reach him was a foolish and childish mistake. A military general without the protection of his soldiers was as weak as a straw. Western traders. Bang! A muffled sound that was several times louder than the previous one. Countless figures flew in all directions, and before they even landed on the ground, they were all dead. That's more reasonable. Norman felt that it was natural. I wonder if the Honorable Martial Banner of Knights is dead or alive. Norman did not escape either. The moment Tang Tian made his move, Sima Xiao also made his move. Magatama appeared behind Norman like a ghost, and with a flash of light, Norman's head landed in Magatama's hands. Blue Wind City. It's just too boring, Lance said lazily. There's no war to fight. The soldiers' courage was slowly sapped. The blood in their eyes slowly faded, and what replaced it was fear. They had never seen such a powerful assassin before. Their speed was as fast as lightning, and no one could withstand a single move. They were like demons that walked out from hell, emotionless, coldly harvesting lives, and never knowing fatigue. It looks rather miserable. Lance scratched his chin. The soldiers who had lost their general were like scattered sand. Fear took hold of their hearts, and they started to turn and escape. Norman was startled. After a long while, he laughed bitterly. Seems like we have met with a huge problem. What do we do now? Norman asked. Lance also felt that it was troublesome. Why is Carl so careless? Sigh. This time we have to clean up his mess. Sigh. I knew that the Wester trader's money would not be easy to take. Let's go. We have taken his money. We cannot just watch him get killed. Who will we ask for money from in the future? Chapter 869. Sophie took it and took a look. She could not believe her own eyes. Impossible. Sophie shook her head. There are too many coincidences. There are too many accidental factors. I feel that it is more likely to be the Gold Continent. They want to disrupt our southern expedition. The Southern Alliance is from Heaven's Road. They do not have such a deep understanding of us. The possibility of it being the Gold Continent is higher. I'm afraid that the Sin Domain is their target. Even if they were piloting small warships, they firmly believed that they could defeat any enemy. The silver light that had disappeared for 1,000 years blossomed once again in the distant foreign land. The horns were like frost dazzling. Enemy attack. The Gold Continent and the Honorable Marshall Continent, one in the east and one in the west, were the two strongest powerhouses. Both sides looked at each other from afar. They did not have any direct conflict of interest, but had restraining fear towards each other. Ling Su's eyes suddenly opened wide. He bellowed, "Attack!" Seems like we need to clean ourselves up to prevent some people from having unrealistic thoughts. Charles' tone did not have any warmth. Lance and Norman were killed by assassins. Carl had colluded with the enemy, causing the Lance army to suffer heavy losses. In times of need, the Honorable Marshal Banner of Knights could interfere in any matter and take over any army. Then what about us? Oliver. The reply he got was a roar that sounded like a dam bursting. Kill. What kind of general was what kind of army they had? Sophie noticed that Charles had a bitter smile on his face. She rarely saw such an expression on his face. In her impression, Charles always had a smile on his face, and was so confident that it was irritating. Every Honorable Marshal Banner of Knights gave their lives to Temple. Their holy flame of life burned in Temple, and only when they died would the holy flame extinguish. It was obvious that the fleet was afraid of being ambushed, and were extremely careful. Charles's handsome face was extremely calm. Roger is not weak, and under normal circumstances, he will not be killed so easily. If the enemy is an army, or if Roger thinks that he has no chance of winning, Roger will definitely escape. He knows that it is more important to send the news back. Only if Roger misjudges the situation or falls into a trap, and Roger does not sense the danger, can he be killed. The enemy definitely does not have many people, and they're extremely strong. That is why they can kill Roger. We need to send people over. Charles regained his composure. We need to use the fastest speed to understand what is going on and take care of them. The longer this drags on, the worse it will be for us. He risked his life in cultivation, risked his life in battle, and became the Ling Su of today. The angry roars of the officers echoed in every corner of the warship. Everyone involuntarily straightened their backs and gripped the silver spears in their hands tightly. Silver frost mounts. All of the generals replied and raised the silver spears in their hands. An almost undetectable warm smile flashed across Ling Su's stone-like face. His eyes fell on the enemy in front of him again, and a lofty feeling rose from his chest. Carl. Charles gritted his teeth. His handsome face was extremely sinister as he spoke. The Wester traders have colluded with the enemy and are plotting a rebellion. Immediately investigate them. Find out for me. I want to see what benefits the other party gave them, for them to actually dare to betray Temple. They're here. They're here, a scout said excitedly. As for himself, he had not done anything. The disappeared hero, the former legend, the supreme glory of Aries constellation. The sheephorn wind bells fluttered without any wind, and amidst the melodious chimes, an ancient and desolate war song floated out from the sheephorn seal. A shrill alarm sounded out in the fleet, and the three warships quickly reacted. The warships that were originally at the two sides of the replenishment ship quickly moved forward and positioned their bodies horizontally. The soldiers on the warships moved quickly and quickly entered their battle positions. The warship weapons on the warships lit up one after another. They had completed their preparations and were ready to attack. In such a sensitive and crucial period, the Honorable Marshall Continent's internal stability surpassed everything else. Everyone's faces were extremely ugly. The Honorable Marshall Banner of Knights were not only used to protect Temple's supreme authority. In the Honorable Marshall Continent, the Honorable Marshall Banner of Knights held an extremely high position and were one of the symbols of Temple. Sophie knew of Colin. He was an outstanding person, and, compared to the Lazy Lance, he was much more stable. Sophie never thought that the situation would become so complicated. If this is a trap, then it's too scary. Charles muttered. There will be news soon. Charles's expression remained stern. I have a report here. I suspect that it has a personal relationship with Roger. I hope my intuition is wrong. When was the last time an Honorable Marshall Banner of Knights was injured? Before the Honorable Marshall Continent unified the Western region, and Ling Su's mission was to make the enemy's nervous manpower even more nervous. Sophie's body trembled. You're saying? The officer was about to give the order to attack when his eyes suddenly constricted. What? What is that? The soldiers of the Honorable Marshall Continent shared a common enemy, their eyes revealing rage. Now that Lance has been killed, it means that the Western region is completely empty. If Teacher knew that I have tossed out the Silver Frost mounts, he will definitely be dumbstruck. A Honorable Marshall Banner of Knights rushed in. He brought the latest news. The formation was majestic and did not move an inch. In the distance, a small fleet appeared in their field of vision. Their formation was extremely unique. The left and right wings were like sheep horns, extending forward in an arc, while Ling Su's center army was at the back. Above Ling Su's head, the Silver Frost sheep horn seal floated, releasing a faint silver light that enveloped the entire army. One after another, silver stripes appeared beneath the feet of the soldiers, like the whorls on the sheep horns. Before the battle, he could only watch as Crane killed in all four directions and achieved many meritorious deeds, causing his name to spread to him. Even Jing Hao, who could only defend the Shang continent previously, controlled the energy vortex to work together with Crane and almost buried the enemy's entire fleet. No, Charles shook his head. We have just convicted him. If we use him now, it will damage Temple's prestige. Let Colin go. Take charge of all matters in the Western region. Whoever or whatever army dares to disobey orders, kill them on the spot. Seeing the determination on Charles's face, Sophie nodded her head. She asked, what news? No one dared to become enemies with the Honorable Marshall Banner of Knights. Ling Su's expression was equally solemn. For some reason, he thought of his teacher. Silver Frost mounts. Ling Su bellowed and raised the silver spear in his hand. With such a small number of people, they dare to directly charge at us. That is a naked disdain towards us. The warships that were on high alert immediately discovered the enemy. Sophie did not say anything. She was still immersed in shock. Out of all the lieutenant generals, Lance had the highest possibility of becoming a great general. His strength and talent were extremely outstanding. The reason why Charles dared to so decisively send Oliver to Temple was because he firmly believed that Lance could stabilize the situation. Yes, prepare to go to the Shang continent, Charles said resolutely. Regardless of what tricks they have up their sleeves, as long as we find the passage, victory will be ours. The silver spear is like snow, untainted by the clouds. The sound of the sheep horn bells, the cool breeze does not carry it. The sun shines, but no shadows. The spear is straight. The vast heart protect my stars. Thinking about the Sin domain that had revived and the Gold Continent bandits that appeared and disappeared unpredictably, the situation in the Western region was extremely dangerous. Ling Su took a deep breath. He had prepared for a long time for this ambush. Sophie's face was as cold as ice, her entire body releasing a terrifying killing intent. Even the Honorable Marshall Banner of Knights nearby could not take it, and could not help but take 2 steps back. Just a moment ago, the clan elder in charge of Holy Flames came to report with a flustered expression, saying that Roger's life Holy Flames had been extinguished. A haze flashed past Charles's eyes, and he said, "I have an extremely dangerous premonition. The front lines have suffered continuous losses. The Sin domain has revived, and the Gold Continent bandits have yet to be found. The timing is so coincidental. Don't you think it is too coincidental?" When Charles finished reading, his face turned green. Ling Su's face was filled with killing intent without saying a word. He spoke with an ice-cold tone. "Get ready. Whoever drops the chain today will be stabbed to death by my spear. We are the elites of the honorable martial continent. We are invincible. All of these dirty fellows only dare to use sneak attacks against us. They are afraid of us and do not dare to fight us head-on. The supply ships that lack the protection of the fleet were their best targets." That's right. Sophie calmed down. She was extremely clear of Roger's strength and standard. The revival of the Sin domain had already made Charles cautious. The Western traders colluding with the enemy had completely solidified his determination to cleanse them. Everyone's killing intent was released, and they were also stifled. Who doesn't have some pride? Seeing my own comrades stirring up trouble in the battlefield, while I can only crawl in the mud, how can I not be angry? 3 supply ships with 3 small-scale warships protecting them. Thinking about Go Chung Wendao's vast and mighty fleet that covered the sky, Ling Su could not help but sigh. Crane and Jing, how are truly too ferocious. All the voices disappeared, and all of them had solemn expressions. Charles took a deep breath. Regarding the Sin domain, they have revived. It seems that our Sin domain army did not guard the door well. The Gold Continent bandits and the Sin domain, our western region is currently bustling with activity. And I suspect that the 2 of them have already colluded together, and the Sin domain is starting to jump up and down. Although I believe that the majority of them are still loyal to Temple, but at this crucial moment, we have to be on guard. The enemy's speed became faster and faster, like a silver lightning. The silver spears were like a forest, whimpering as they reverberated. Ling Su's killing intent soared, his gaze unkind. Although he did not think that he was wasting time, but Ling Su would never find excuses. If they were late, then they were late. If they did not obtain any merits, then they did not have any excuses. Luo Jie is dead. Charles nodded his head. That makes sense. The Gold Continent also understands that once we complete the Southern Expedition, unifying the Sacred Saint Galaxy is just around the corner. But their timing is truly good. Yes, one of the honorable Martial Banner of Knights immediately turned and left. In this period of time, he had been training his silver frost mounts. Compared to the invincible Iron Cavalry in history, this group of fake goods under his command was far too inferior. Luckily for him, he had the Silver Frost Sheephorn Seal, which contained the method to train the Silver Frost mounts. Ling Su knew that he was not a genius and was not as smart as Crane, but he had absolute confidence in himself, and that was to fight. Damn it. Come, let's tell these dirty ants that they are not worthy to be our opponents. Their target was the honorable Martial Continent supply ships and the Shan Continent's Gocheng Wendao. Their fleet had been destroyed, and they were waiting for reinforcements. The closest to Gocheng Wendao was the army that he had arranged at the supply line. On one hand, they had to support Gocheng Wendao. On the other hand, they had to ensure the safety of the supply line. Thus, they were lacking in manpower. Chapter 870. The thick pillar of light and the sword ray collided with the thin membrane of light without any fancy moves. The dense and chaotic energy produced intense explosions. The orange flames were like a monster that broke out of its cocoon, devouring everything around it. The unstable energy in the battlefield was too much and became the best fuel. A chain of explosions occurred in a short period of time, frantically spreading out. The burning silver light was rapidly compressed, forming a layer of condensed light film that seemed to be real. One after another, sword auras and spear auras struck the enemies, exploding into shattered auras. Most importantly, although they were piloting small-scale warships, but they were the best of the best. Their fighting capabilities were strong, far surpassing the ordinary warships on the market. His understanding of battles had never changed. Attack. Attack with all your might. The officers were hysterical. In a battle in the sea of energy, having a warship or not had a huge difference. Without a warship, they had to face the corrosion of the sea of energy, and the synchronization of energy had become extremely difficult. The warship's weapons only needed to be controlled. The energy was provided by the warship, and the hull could even provide protection for the soldiers. Looking at the members in front of him who had regained their fighting spirit, he was furious. His own Silver Frost mounts were actually not confident enough. Ling Su announced expressionlessly, "Tomorrow's training will be doubled." The soldiers were also in a frenzy. The threat of death had completely ignited their potential. They disregarded everything else and attacked, even if they were injured. Many of the soldiers had blood flowing out of their mouths, causing their sinister faces to look even more terrifying. The originally goat, horn-like formation began to approach each other. They were like two silver lightning bolts intertwining in the air. The entire formation was like a spinning lightning bolt, dragging a long silver light tail. Behind the tail were extremely concentrated radiating ripples. On the battlefield, imposing manner was an extremely subtle thing. It deeply affected every aspect of the battle: determination, focus, confidence, etc., and the soldiers' performance was directly related to it. Ling Su and the rest had already completed their turn, and once again began their assault. Without any suspense, like a red-hot knife cutting through butter, the second warship was also sliced in half, transforming into two balls of flames. But he did not explain to his members, in case they became arrogant after a small victory. Such a high-pressure policy might be effective, but it did not originate from faith, and once it reached a critical point, it would quickly crumble. The soldiers quivered, and all opened fire. As if awakened from a dream, the officers roared, "Fire!" The power of the explosion was so great that even the fleet was affected, and it was forcibly pushed back over 200 feet. Ling Su was in a good mood. In any case, he had achieved a breakthrough from zero. This was something to be happy about. A sharp aura surged. The attack was too fierce. Before the light fragments could dissipate, new light fragments exploded. In the blink of the eye, the Silver Frost Mount's figure was engulfed by the continuously expanding shattered auras and could not be seen clearly. However, the three battleships had no intention of stopping. They didn't dare to stop and could only continue to attack. Even though he was now leading a team, this did not change. He was straightforward and efficient. Regardless of whether his opponent was insignificant or as deep as the ocean, he would always go all out and never leave a way out. This was his spear technique, this was his fighting style. The honorable Martial Continent's strict discipline was displayed, even though they knew that they had no chance of winning. The remaining two transport ships did not surrender. Ling Su did not waver in the slightest. His orange eyes were like raging flames, burning fiercely. "As long as you are more tenacious than them," Ling Su said coldly. A terrifying explosion. One spear to death. The soldiers watched on blankly as the silver light enlarged in their vision. Attack! Attack! All-out attack! Inside the bright red flames, a group of silver figures rushed out. They were the Silver Frost Mounts. On their light membrane, there were many remnants of flames, and, compared to before, the light membrane was much dimmer, almost to the point of being transparent, like a bubble that could burst at any moment. The clothes on their bodies were also damaged to varying degrees, and the weaker Silver Frost Mounts were even more heavily injured. But he quickly reacted, his face turning pale white. He used all his strength to shout, "They are still alive!" The indestructible protective barrier was like a piece of paper instantly shattering into pieces. But the enemy is so tenacious. The member muttered. Even the transport ships were so tenacious. It was a huge blow to them. The Silver Frost Mounts were immediately filled with wails. The joy of victory seemed to have been diluted by a lot. Even the disciples of the 5 Southern Island families had ugly expressions on their faces. It was obvious that the Honorable Marshall Continent was not an easy opponent to defeat. The 5 Southern Island families in the Honorable Marshall Continent had a blood feud, and the enemy was much stronger than they had imagined. Damn it! The warship's attacks were actually unable to do anything to the enemy's thin light membrane. Following their increase in speed, Ling Su's position continued to move forward. The sword auras and spear auras suddenly became denser, and the sudden light auras even affected the vision of the soldiers on the warship. But no one cared about it. They only had one thought in their minds. The members of the Silver Frost Mounts looked at their results and gradually regained their senses from their excitement. If it was said that they only had an intuition of danger previously, then even the stupidest person would know that the situation was not good. Crack! It was as though the warship was sliced into 2 by a gigantic blade. The soldiers on the warship were completely panicking. They tried their best to rush out, with only one thought in their minds: escape. Everything in their vision had disappeared, and only the terrifying red light remained. The warship's protective barrier had been activated to its limit, but everyone could still feel the scorching heat. Ling Su suddenly stopped. His gaze was like a blade that swept across everyone. Many of them lowered their heads, but even more of them looked at him with anticipation. The soldiers and officers on the warship were shocked by the Silver Frost Mount's imposing aura and were momentarily dazed. But in that short moment of daze, the Silver Frost Mounts had barged into their attack range. Ling Su's style had directly influenced the Silver Frost Mounts. Their fearlessness towards death was already the most prominent characteristic of the group. Previously, the sharp aura that the 3 warships felt was only from the Silver Frost Mounts enveloping the entire battlefield. But now, the extremely dense sharp aura had been compressed from the entire battlefield and converged onto their bodies, causing the feeling to be completely different. The warship's protective barrier was unable to give them any sense of security. It was as though they were being stabbed by blades. All of the blood in their bodies were frozen, and their skin felt as though it was being sliced by blades. Before they could escape, a loud bang sounded out. A dazzling light aura suddenly lit up and mercilessly devoured the soldiers that were unable to escape in time. The explosion of the warship had completely destroyed the enemy's fighting spirit, and the remaining warship and 2 transport ships escaped in different directions. But for the sake of pursuing an even more concentrated attack, the 3 warships were extremely close to each other, and before the 3rd warship could even escape 300 m away, Ling Su and the Silver Frost Mounts caught up to it and was completely destroyed. And when Ling Su rushed to the front of the group, the momentum of his assault reached its peak. An intense fear spread out from the soldiers' hearts. They were all experienced veterans and had a special intuition towards danger. Without needing the officers to urge them, they attacked frantically. The dazzling light auras shot towards the incoming enemies like raindrops. All of the soldiers on the warships were veterans and knew that the best way to face fear and danger was to use all of their strength. The Silver Frost Mounts were like extremely sharp silver spears, effortlessly piercing into the hull of the warship. The sturdy hull was unable to stop the Silver Frost Mounts at all. Wherever the Silver Frost Mounts passed, wood shavings and broken limbs would fly. Many people did not even have the time to scream out before Ling Su and the Silver Frost Mounts had already passed through the ship. Bang, bang, bang. The nearby sea of energy was completely stirred. Suddenly, their gazes coincidentally swept across the soldiers outside the window, and as though they were struck by lightning, they were dumbstruck. Someone could not help but sigh. These fellows are truly tenacious. The Silver Frost Mounts did not make any movements to dodge, giving the 3 warships a huge advantage in their attacks, as they were able to lock onto their targets effortlessly. The pitiful speed of the transport ships made it impossible for them to escape. Bang! The entire sea of energy seemed to tremble, and even inside the warships, the soldiers could clearly feel the terrifying tremors. The light pillars and sword auras were like fragile biscuits, shattering into pieces, transforming into a rain of light. The Silver Frost Mounts' forward momentum was completely unaffected. The 3 small-scale warships, each warship had 6 warship weapons, and the 18 warship weapons were the honorable martial continent's officers' greatest confidence. To them, controlling the warship weapons was much more advantageous than using an army to attack. But no one retreated. All of them held onto the silver spears in their hands tightly, surging energy surging out from their bodies and into the sheephorn seal above their heads. The sheephorn seal's light aura suddenly expanded, releasing an even denser silver light. The initially unstable light barrier quickly congealed and became even more congealed than before. The silver light released by the sheephorn seal suddenly combusted. The light aura around Ling Su's body suddenly became extremely dazzling. The extremely sharp aura instantly enveloped the entire sea of energy. The two silver lights that were originally entangled suddenly merged into one, becoming as straight as a spear, and the dazzling Ling Su was the sharpest spearhead. Master, can we truly defeat the honorable martial continent? On the waterway, only the raging flames remained. There were no survivors. Everyone was shocked, but they were even more relieved. Such a terrifying explosion. Without the protection of the warships, no one could survive. The taut strings loosened, and the exhausted soldiers sat on the ground one after another. Although the battle was short, but to everyone, it was as though they had strolled through the gates of hell. It was extremely bitter. Ling Su did not find it strange at all. In Heaven's Road, he had long seen how Temple treated their own military generals. He knew that it was not that the soldiers did not want to surrender, but that they did not dare to, because it would implicate their families. That's right, no one surrendered. No wonder the honorable martial continent is so strong. Ling Su frowned. Bullshit. Suddenly, a member asked, causing everyone to stop what they were doing and look at Ling Su. But all of their confidence had crumbled in the face of the assault. Chapter 871. Blue Dwarf Army. Go Chung Wondao squinted his eyes. He was surprised. Under such circumstances, Colin was entrusted with a heavy responsibility. An army barracks in the central Yongming continent was attacked, causing the panic in the honorable martial continent to reach its peak. Qin walked in, and when Go Chung Wondao saw Qin's battered and exhausted appearance, his heart sank. The supply lines were continuously attacked, and from the current reports, it should be two small armies. One of them was the Underworld Continent's demonic mounts. The Southern Alliance had a group of Underworld Continent's demonic mounts. They were extremely powerful, and many people knew of them. The Underworld Continent's demonic mounts, a declining army, had regained its glory in the hands of the Southern Alliance and attracted everyone's attention. The awakening of the Blue Dwarves was extremely rare, and the Blue Dwarf Army was even rarer. The Blue Dwarf armies were basically all active in the core region of the Blue World. In the past Blue Tide, there had never been a Blue Dwarf army. But it was this bad hand of cards, but the Southern Alliance turned it into something miraculous and forcefully turned it into a good hand. The fear continued to grow until the Gold Continent bandits killed their way out of the western region and into the central region. Zhong Libai turned to look at the continuous mountain valleys. He was extremely moved. I finally ran out of that damn place. There were no traces of enemies around. It was a desolate place. The current Silver Frost mounts and Underworld Continent's demonic mounts once again made Go Chung Wondao feel uneasy. But the Blue Dwarf Army made Go Chung Wondao cautious. Countless eyes in the honorable martial continent were staring at Colin. Colin's steady and experienced actions made many people secretly nod their heads. It was good that the Sin Domain was revived. Regardless of how the enemies tossed and turned, Temple's absolute strength far surpassed the Sin Domain. In such a situation, the so-called stratagems were not as effective as suppressing them with strength. Temple's nervousness could be imagined. Yes, Qin's voice was hoarse. There are many Blue Dwarfs. It should be the Blue Dwarf Army. Their attacks are extremely methodical, and we have suffered huge losses. Everyone in the Holy Cathedral firmly believed that Sir Colin would return triumphantly this time. Zhong Libai did not waste any time. He quickly led the monster army and launched a surprise attack on one of Temple's barracks. This army that was formed to maintain order never thought that they would meet such a strong enemy. and for the sake of not alerting the enemy, Zhongli specially ordered for the monsters to use their pitiful flying abilities to quietly fly out of the barracks. Xie En was just an ordinary military general in the past. His most dazzling achievement was to be in charge of the security of a local army. What was worse was that he and his swift army were bought by Tang Tian. He bought it at an extremely low price, so low that it made one's hair stand on end. Zhongli was like a crafty wolf. His movements were unpredictable and hard to predict. What was even more cunning was that he only looked for the weak local armies to take action. More and more of the local armies were being killed, and one after another, the massacre caused the atmosphere in the honorable martial continent to become even tenser. The local armies were all in danger, as though they were facing a great enemy, afraid that the Gold Continent bandits would kill their way in. After the Blue Tide had happened for so many years, the Sacred Saint's understanding of the Blue Dwarves had also gradually increased. The number of Blue Dwarves in the Blue World was almost endless. They often appeared like a tide. Most of the Blue Dwarves did not have intelligence. They did not have independent consciousness. They relied on their numbers and instincts to fight. When they encountered an enemy, they would swarm forward. The honorable martial continent had not had a war for a long time, and such cruel actions were unheard of. In the history of the honorable martial continent, they had always been the ones who brought pain to others. Compared to the underworld continent's demonic mounts, the other silver frost mounts were unknown. It was said that it was an army that had just been formed, and even their commander was a rookie. But it was this rookie army and their rookie commander that caused his supply line to be in chaos. To Zhongli, who was a maniac in destruction, such an opportunity was extremely rare, and it was like a piece of fatty meat was placed in front of him. He could attack from any direction he wanted. Goqing Wendao looked at the report expressionlessly. Goqing Wendao knew why there was such a huge deviation. It was this group of people that made it difficult for him to move forward and caused him to fall into such a passive state. Seeing their growth, Goqing Wendao felt a bone-chilling cold. He did not know how Tang Tian had gathered this group of people, but behind this group of people, there was a mysterious figure. They knew that the situation was dangerous. They did not have a path of retreat, and it was definitely not the time to care about casualties. Other than advancing forward, they had no other choice. We were ambushed by the Blue Dwarves. Zhongli face was covered with stubble, making him look like a savage. He did not care. His eyes that resembled a hungry wolf flashed with a dangerous light aura. He had used the big canyon to shake off the enemies, which meant that he had regained the initiative. He heard footsteps outside. It's Ken. Goqing Wendao's mind was roused. A trace of anticipation grew in his heart. Could it be that we have found the entrance to Heaven's Road? Ken knew what the master meant. He took a deep breath and said with determination, "Yes." Blue Dwarfs? Goqing Wendao was startled. For some reason, he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He quickly sensed that he was acting strangely and could not help but laugh bitterly. It seemed like his fear towards the Southern Alliance had far exceeded his imagination. He did not leave a single captive. What made Goqing Wendao even more worried was not just the situation. He suddenly realized that their estimation of the Southern Alliance's strength had deviated greatly. Even Goqing Wendao, who had his eyes on the top of his head, had to admit that Bing was an outstanding commander. It could be said that Bing had used his own strength to bring about the Southern Alliance's current situation. The 5 Southern Island families that had escaped, the never-before-heard Crane, the newly formed Silver Frost Mounts, and Jing Hao, who was hidden in the energy vortex upon their appearance, they had released dazzling light auras that caused the entire Sacred Saint Galaxy to turn their heads. Looking at the cards in the Southern Alliance's hands, compared to the honorable Martial Continent, they were all trash. In the entire Southern Alliance's camp, the only one that could be considered famous was actually Baiyu. There was no need to talk about the underworld continent's demonic mounts. They had long been forgotten by the people, and in the eyes of the people, they were just swindlers. But under Tang Tian's command, they had transformed into a terrifying iron cavalry that caused people to tremble in fear. In the current underworld continent, the once-forgotten demonic mounts test had once again become popular. With the continuous addition of new blood, the Iron Cavalry became even stronger. Bing, the Southern Alliance's commander-in-chief, was the first Spirit General Commander in history. It was Bing who was in charge of the Central Command, deploying the troops, that gave Go Chung-Won-Dao a huge problem. He was like a sharp and dangerous blade that had pierced into the enemy's soft abdomen. At the same time, he bought the Skull Unit, a mercenary army that was not even considered as a standard in the eyes of the Honorable Marshall Continent. But it was precisely this mercenary army that had displayed an extremely cruel and intense battle in the Stone Forest Sand Continent. Their tenacious fighting spirit had shocked the Sacred Saint Galaxy. Although he could roughly guess the Southern Alliance's next attack, but when it truly happened, Go Chung-Won-Dao was still depressed. The Sin Domain's revival made them feel as though they were facing a great enemy, and their mental state was extremely tense. If we were to say that swallowing Heaven's Road was the dream of the Honorable Marshall Continent for generations, then the Sin Domain's return to the Honorable Marshall Continent had the possibility of destroying their foundation. The fleet was heavily damaged, and he only had a few pitiful small-scale warships, which were more like a feast for the enemy. The Southern Alliance was extremely proficient in fighting in the sea of energy on foot, and they had obviously gone through specialized training. Before this, Go Chung-Won-Dao would never have thought that there would actually be people who would persevere through such training. The Sea of Energy was still the world of warships. That was the most basic knowledge. Go Chung-Won-Dao did not have many ideas. The Southern Alliance had completely toppled that common sense. Ever since the ambush at the Wreckage region, it was as though the Southern Alliance was continuously demonstrating to them how armies could contend against warships in the Sea of Energy. Tactics that completely went against common sense were displayed in the Southern Alliance. Go Chung-Won-Dao had personally experienced it, and it was an extremely profound experience. Controlling the energy vortices and lying in ambush in the energy turbulence region for 5 days, those tactics were even more unfathomable and unheard of. Go Chung-Won-Dao looked deeply at his left and right arms and nodded his head. Do not care about the casualties. All of the soldiers that can be moved will be under your command, including my direct subordinate army. The request for reinforcements from Temple has already been sent out, and very quickly, Temple's reinforcements will arrive. It was not strange to meet the Blue Dwarves in the Blue World, as the Blue World was the Blue Dwarves' world, and it would be strange if they did not meet the Blue Dwarves. It was not strange for them to suffer huge losses from encountering the Blue Dwarves, as the Blue World's environment was not suitable for the Honorable Marshall Continent's armies to fight, while the Blue Dwarves were able to unleash their greatest strength, and Go Chung-Won-Dao had long expected such losses. Go Chung-Won-Dao raised his head, his face expressionless. Can we still continue? Go Chung-Won-Dao was an arrogant and confident man, but he was definitely not a fool. Yes, it is definitely an army, and they're well trained. If we were on the ground or in the Sea of Energy, we would definitely win, but we are not used to the Blue World. Ken said solemnly. He did not exaggerate, nor did he hide anything. When the bronze monsters broke through the barracks like a tide, all of the soldiers who were still asleep were unable to resist at all, and were all captured by Zhongli Bai. Colin knew why he was Temple's first choice, and knew the situation that Temple was in. After receiving the order, he did not advance rashly. After sending out a large number of scouts to the White Fields continent, his large army fought steadily, and along the way, they continued to gather the local armies. Go Chung-Won-Dao was right. Temple had already received his request for reinforcements, but he definitely did not expect that Temple was also in trouble. Ken's voice was filled with fatigue. They actually met with the Blue Dwarves' army, and the situation was slightly abnormal. Out of the many lieutenant generals, Colin's talent could not be compared to Lance, and could only be considered average. But his way of doing things was extremely stable, he was diligent, and had never made any mistakes. Zhongli Bai did not have any intention to restrain himself. In a short period of time, he had fought in multiple continents, and consecutively took down a few barracks. And in every battle, he did not leave anyone alive. The entire Honorable Marshall Continent was shocked by Zhong Li Bai's ruthless actions. Chapter 872. The Light Palace simultaneously let out a sigh of relief. The order was passed down, and the army quickly advanced towards Whitefields continent. Colin decided to set up camp in the Whitefields continent and see what the desolate continent had become. If the energy was really thin, it would be a big problem, especially during such a crucial period. Right above the Sindor army's encampment, there was an additional stronghold that was heavily guarded. What was even more unexpected was that the desolate continent was actually transformed into a place similar to the Sin domain. The energy in the entire desolate continent was extremely sparse, and the scouts that entered were completely unable to adapt. There's not even a shadow. What's there to scout? Another scout mumbled, his face a little pale. After flying for 3 days without seeing a single person, it was definitely not a pleasant experience. This time, no one had any objections. Everyone was frightened. Everyone suppressed the shock in their hearts and answered in unison, "Yes. I handed the matter over to you, and you're just going to give me this kind of answer?" The golden holy flame silently swallowed. Charles was also secretly surprised. He never thought that Temple would actually be lacking in manpower, but he maintained a calm expression. Immediately set off the fleet to reinforce the Shan continent. Do not delay. Master Jaya could not be touched. He urged Colin to be faster and told him that he had to get rid of the Whitefields continent before the second wave of reinforcements. This was a must. We have no time to waste. The fire whip struck Charles's back, causing his body to tremble. His handsome face contorted and his whole body to tremble. This whip seemed to have struck his soul. The immense pain caused his mind to go blank and his body to spasm. Everyone was stunned. They looked at each other and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Which one of them wasn't a person of high status and prestige? But just now, they couldn't even muster the slightest bit of resistance. The first elder was too terrifying. Each word exploded in the air, ringing in everyone's ears. The Gold Province bandits are very good at hide and seek. We can't be anxious. Charles was as calm as usual. The first thing we have to do is limit the Gold Province bandits' activity space. Bandits were like fish on a chopping board once there was no more space. The 4 lieutenant generals in charge of the second wave of reinforcements moved out from 4 directions and squeezed the Gold Province bandit space. I need you to put a cage around the Golden Province bandits. As long as we put a cage on them, a few local armies will be enough to exhaust them. The great clan elder did not care about worldly affairs for many years, and wholeheartedly researched on Heaven's Road martial techniques. The matters of Temple were usually handed over to Charles and the other clan elders. The great clan elder did not have any presence, and the new clan elders had never even seen the great clan elder before. Yeah, I've been here before, and there are mining ships everywhere. We've been flying for so long, but we haven't seen a single person. It's like the uninhabited continent. It's a little scary. Charles said, once the second wave of support leaves, we will only have Sir Jaya and Colin left. Master Jaya was definitely untouchable, and if Colin had not taken care of the Whitefields continent, that meant that the honorable Marshall continent was completely empty. If something happens, we won't even have people to put out the fire. But at that moment, the entire temple was bowing down to the great clan elder. Even the air and energy were trembling. Everyone in the hall kept quiet out of fear, their faces pale. Above them, a burly figure was shrouded in golden flames, and his face could not be seen. The roar came from within the flames. Everyone below looked at the golden flames with reverence. All of you shut up. The great clan elder's roar resonated through the entire temple, and even the light in the pillar of light trembled. He had thought of the situation that he might face, but he never expected that the remnants of the Sin domain would actually have the ability to change the environment. A group of scouts all had ugly expressions on their faces. They looked at each other. Charles, who was bending down, trembled. The great clan elder's gaze on his back seemed to have solidified, causing him to feel as if his back was burning, and actually produced a burning pain. That handsome face was as calm as still water. He said respectfully, "Great elder, 7 barracks were continuously massacred, it is truly shocking. I have never seen such a scene before. The scouts at the front kept on sending back news. Everyone looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. When Colin's army arrived at the Whitefields continent, he was stunned by the desolate scene in front of him. Time. Charles had the pearl of wisdom in his hands. He said calmly, "We don't have much time. More importantly, we are lacking in manpower, especially our elites. On the contrary, we have many local armies, extremely many, and their fighting strength is unable to support the front lines. Since that's the case, why do we need to waste our precious elites?" The scouts felt even more intense. Why don't we let them settle it directly? An elder could not help but ask. The elders were enlightened, and all nodded their heads. Hearing that, the captain no longer objected. "All right, then let us return. We will inspect the cities along the way. That is the best place to set up an ambush." "What we do now?" an elder asked. "Our target, Whitefields continent, advance at full speed. Is this still the flourishing and stable honorable Marshall continent?" Bang! Although Temple's order would increase the trouble for him, but the situation forced him to do so. Without hesitation, he immediately gave the order to advance. This battle will not be easy. Everyone bowed even lower. The honorable Marshall Palace was dead silent. Only Charles's beast-like gasps of pain could be heard clearly. Everyone knew that the great clan elder was truly enraged. The whip of Saint Punishment was a punishment to the soul and originated from the deepest pain in a person's heart. "We're not done scouting." The captain hesitated. A thick pillar of light shot down from an unfathomable depth in the sky. The dense, radiant energy enveloped the White Palace. The snow-white palace looked as though it was carved out of the purest white marble, and the white light from the pillar of light continued to enter the palace. Only those who had been here before knew that the entire palace was completely condensed out of radiant energy. Jair is holding the fort. Colin is going to the Whitefields continent. Lance is dead, and Oliver is still locked up. An army formed by 5 lieutenant generals is preparing to move out. They're going to support the Shan continent. This is the first wave. They're going to bring a large number of warships to go Chengwondao. Other than that, we need to increase the manpower for the supply line. Our supply line is too long. So we need to prepare for the second wave. The Honorable Marshal Banner of Knights also need to go. We need to quickly find the entrance to Heaven's Road. Ordinary soldiers are weak in the blue world. The problem now is who will handle the Gold Continent bandits. No one had ever seen the great clan elder lose his composure and roar. In their hearts, it was as though even if Temple disappeared, the great clan elder would remain indifferent. Colin's face was gloomy. He had never seen such a desolate scene in the honorable Marshall continent. "What about the Gold Continent bandits?" an elder asked worriedly. Many people nodded their heads. "Punish? Of course we will punish them." The great clan elder's face was completely enveloped by the holy flame, and no one could tell if he was happy or angry. He suddenly raised his right arm, and the golden holy flame extended along his arm, transforming into a golden fiery whip. The clothes on his back were as smooth as before, without any traces of fire, and not even a single wrinkle. Every city that they passed by was empty, and the morale of the army was affected, causing them to be slightly low. There were no bandits in the honorable Marshall continent. Colin received the order from Temple, but did not say anything. He was extremely clear of the current situation in the honorable Marshall continent. To him, it was the most difficult period for the honorable Marshall continent, and also the most important period for them. The honorable Marshall continent would actually face a day where they did not have enough military strength. The powerful honorable Marshall continent, the honorable Marshall continent that was famed for its military strength, the honorable Marshall continent that was filled with famous generals, actually did not have enough military strength. That was the holy flame, the highest grade holy flame. The great clan elder's voice was not fast, but it was filled with authority and power. Every word was like a golden hammer smashing into the air. There was practically no one in the entire Whitefields continent. Every city was empty. After the calamity of the Gold Continent bandits, the number of people in the Whitefields continent had declined greatly. And because the Whitefields continent and the Desolate continent were too close in this period of time, Sin-Domain martial artists would continuously appear, causing even more panic. The citizens who were initially prepared to watch all chose to leave, as there were too many places like the Whitefields continent in the western region. After a full 5 minutes, Sacred Son Charles's eyes that looked as though they were on the verge of death regained some spirit, but deep in his eyes there was still a trace of fear. It was too terrifying. No matter how strong his willpower was, he definitely did not want to encounter it a second time. Another elder was calculating one by one, his face filled with distress. There is no reason, no excuse, only the result. The great clan elder's gaze swept across the entire place. Colin's expression became serious. Then why is Colin so anxious? Someone asked. Trash. All of you are trash. I think it's about time. Let's go back. One of the more timid scouts could not help but say. Charles knew that begging and evading would only make the great clan elder even angrier. So he took a deep breath. Great clan elder, please punish me. The great clan elder had always favored Charles, and there were even rumors saying that Sacred Son Charles was the great clan elder's illegitimate son. It was the first time the great clan elder had punished Sacred Son Charles, and it was such a severe whip of saint punishment. Charles. Everyone was silent. Many of them had yet to recover from the shock they had just experienced. The great clan elder's anger was still fresh in their minds, and no one dared to go against him. A golden flame soared into the sky, transforming into a shooting star and disappearing. The terrifying pressure suddenly disappeared, and the suffocating atmosphere became lively. Hearing you say that, I, your father, feel a chill down my spine. Quiet, it was extremely quiet. After thinking about it, the results caused all the clan elders to reveal looks of disbelief. In front of us is the worship cemetery. The scout who had been to the Whitefields continent before agreed. There's no one in the city. There definitely won't be anyone in the worship cemetery. We should focus on the Desolate continent. This battle will not be easy to fight. As expected of the Sin-Domain, but is not the Whitefields continent, but the Desolate continent. The Honorable Martial Palace, the entire Honorable Martial continent, the entire temple, the most sacred place, the source of light. Chapter 873. Although she knew that the scouts would not be of much use, but Du Xian you still sent out a large number of scouts. In the Sin-Domain, there were pitifully few armies, but the number of martial artists that had the strength to act as scouts were countless. She did not hope for the scouts to be able to deal much damage to the enemy, but to be able to divert the enemy's attention. Colin's army had lost 15 scouts, while the Sin-Domain only had 2 casualties. It was a huge disparity. But the shrewd and ruthless Colin was completely unaffected. Du Xian did not care about her brother, who was always a bit bookish. Her gaze never left the enemy's formation, and muttered to herself, "The quality of the soldiers is very high, and not inferior to us. The formation is extremely skilled. The synchronization rate that Tang Tian spoke of is definitely very high. They are a powerful army. The problem now, how will he solve it?" Colin did not have enough manpower, but regardless of anything, the army was much stronger than the cannon fodder armies. This made Colin heave a sigh of relief. The first thing Colin did when he entered the Western region was to incorporate the elites. With Oliver in prison, his army was like a group of dragons without a leader. Their morale was extremely low, but their overall strength was not greatly affected, and they were still an elite force that could be used. Colin did not care about the scouts, although there were many of them, but it was a mess, and they were just a motley crew. In a large-scale war, individual strength did not have much use. No matter how strong the scouts were, no matter how many of them there were, it could not change the fact that they were just a motley crew. Du Xian turned and looked at her brother, who had a determined look on his face. His last sentence was resolute and decisive. His gaze landed on the Sindor stronghold. Du Ku and his sister were carefully observing the enemy's barracks. They did not have any guards by their side, making them look no different from the other scouts. The two of them received many objections from their subordinates, but Duca had the confidence and strength to do so. Colin was experienced, and after personally inspecting the desolate continent's environment, he quickly formulated a battle plan. His gaze landed on the Sin Domain scouts that were roaming far away. Their every move was under the surveillance of the Sin Domain scouts. It was Colin's first time seeing a Sin Domain martial artist, as Temple had always kept the matters of the Sin Domain a secret, and the citizens were unable to find any information about the Sin Domain. The barracks were unmoving, but the area dozens of miles away from the barracks was the area where the battle was the most intense. Colin could see the bone-deep hatred in the eyes of the Sin Domain martial artists. They were extremely daring and brimming with aggression, and had already killed over 10 of Colin's scouts. Du Xianyu was not affected by the numbers. She spoke coldly. The Honorable Martial Continent is truly a colossus. If not for Tang Tian, we would not have any chance of winning. The Honorable Martial Continent had 12 of such armies. The 5 great generals were even more astonishing. Every great general had at least 3 such great armies, and their direct subordinated armies were even stronger. I really don't know how Tang Tian's Southern Alliance can stop the 5 great generals' army. Everyone in the fortress wore a solemn expression. The energy in the air was extremely thin, and he felt uncomfortable staying there any longer. Colin felt like a fish out of water. The strong feeling of suffocation made it difficult for him to move. He could even sense that the energy in his body was slowly disappearing, which meant that they definitely could not drag the battle into a stalemate, as it would be disadvantageous to them. Even though he had made all of his preparations to quickly end the battle, but when the battle truly started, he completely forgot about it. Orders after orders were passed down. He patrolled back and forth meticulously. The Sin Domain scouts were extremely agile. The thin energy did not affect them at all, and they were like fish in water in such an environment. Even Du Ku, who was an outsider, could see that Colin's standard was extremely high. From advancing, to setting up camp, to the construction of the camp, the entire process was done in an orderly manner. Every soldier knew what they were supposed to do. The Sin Domain scouts, who were eyeing them like tigers, could not find any opportunity and could only watch from afar. In such an extremely harsh environment, regardless of whether it was their bodies or their minds, all of them were under unprecedented pressure. Scouts were considered elites in any army, and because scouts were usually formed in small groups to carry out missions, they could encounter dangers and unexpected situations at any time, so they had to possess powerful individual strength. Colin did not know that among the Sin Domain scouts that he swept his gaze past, there were 2 big fishes. I wonder how powerful the 5 great generals are. Duca was fascinated. About 10 kilometers away from the Sindor stronghold, the army stopped and set up camp. The numerous scouts were like a pack of wolves, observing from afar. It was Colin's first time stepping onto the desolate continent soil. With such an elite group guarding their retreat path, Colin was completely at ease. The Gold Continent bandits had just appeared in the Yongming continent, which was extremely far from where they were. The possibility of the White Fields continent being attacked was extremely low, but the cautious Colin still arranged a backup plan. After arranging the retreat path, Colin immediately led the army into the desolate continent. Dense energy spewed out from the enemy's camp like a fountain. It was destined to be an extremely difficult battle. After being used to seeing the imposing aura of the Honorable Martial stronghold, the stronghold in front of him was extremely simple and crude in Colin's eyes. But he was not anxious to attack, but gave the order to set up camp. The large number of casualties gave them valuable information. In the entire desolate continent, other than the Sindor stronghold, the Sin Domain survivors did not build any other strongholds. That meant that as long as they took down the Sindor stronghold, they would be able to throw the Sin Domain survivors back into the cage that was the Sin Domain. 15-2. Of course they are. Colin is one of the 12 lieutenant generals. Other than the 5 great generals, he is one of the 12 most powerful people. Du Xian, you're reminded. His barracks are extremely meticulous, and there are no obvious flaws. According to Tang Tian's information, Colin's fighting style is extremely stable. From the looks of it, it truly seems so. Colin's expression returned to normal. After receiving the order, he had specially brought over a large amount of information regarding the Sin domain from Temple. He had sufficient understanding of the Sin domain martial artist's fighting style, and after finding out that the desolate continent's energy was thin, he quickly thought of a way. And as long as he gave the anxious soldiers a bit of hope, they would definitely fight to the death. Colin's expression was terrible. The situation was much more serious than he had imagined. One after another, strict barracks were constructed in an orderly manner. Only when they met Colin did they regain their attention. There are no flaws. Du Exanu shook her head. Her eyes lit up with an enchanting light aura. She was extremely excited in her heart. What is more exciting than defeating our mortal enemies? Du Exanu bit her lips and said with force, "We will definitely win." A large number of Sin domain scouts flew around the army like flies, seeing if they could find an opportunity. Colin did not care at all and turned a blind eye to them. The individual strength of the Sin domain scouts were outstanding, but against the sturdy formation, they did not pose any threat. From the looks of it, the Sin domain scouts held the absolute advantage. The first battle was already enough to make people excited, but the first battle was against the honorable Martial Continent's army. The entire Sin domain army did not even need to be mobilized, as everyone was extremely excited. 10 minutes later, dense energy enveloped Colin's barracks. It did not dissipate, as the barracks had an invisible force that firmly restricted the surging spirit energy. It feels terrible. After entering the desolate continent, the army immediately advanced towards the Sin door stronghold. Although the scouts on his side could not compare to the Sin domain scouts, but Colin still persisted in sending out scouts, even if they suffered heavy casualties. Colin shook his head inwardly and threw the unrealistic thoughts to the back of his mind. In terms of the formation of armies, he trusted Du Xianyu's judgment more. Dooku did not avoid Du Xianyu's gaze and spoke. "Regardless of the price we have to pay, we must win this battle. How is it?" Dooku asked. The hatred between both parties could not be resolved, and the end of the battle would only end with one side's blood flowing. The scouts from both sides started to engage in an intense battle. This battle will not be easy. Colin did not care about observing and spying. It was an upright battle, and there would not be many changes. No one knew how much effort they, the Sin domain, had put in for this battle, and what price they were willing to pay. Du Xianu knew that she was still a newbie, and she would not hesitate to use all the chips she could. What a powerful opponent. Du Xianyu's tone carried a trace of praise. The Sin domain called it the Desolate City, but Colin insisted on calling it the Sin door stronghold. This is the honorable Martial Continent's territory. What qualifications do the remnants of the Sin domain have to name it? The number one man of the Sin domain, in such an environment, he could unleash at least 90% of his strength. Dooku chuckled. Seems like he is a powerful person. He never fought a battle that he was not prepared for. In a sense, it was the Sin domain army's first battle. The Sin domain army was formed by the Du siblings and consisted of the top elites of the Sin domain. After that, they formed an alliance with Tang Tian and attacked the Sin door, which was also Tang Tian's God Armor army. This led to an awkward situation. Ever since the formation of the Sin domain army, they had never fought in a real battle. That's right. Dooku could not help but sigh. Only now do we know that we were looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. Be it the honorable Martial Continent or Tang Tian, they are all huge beings to us. To have an enemy like the honorable Martial Continent is our misfortune, but to have a friend like Tang Tian is our fortune. Fortune can help us, but the fate of our people needs to be fought for with our blood and blades. Dooku and Du Xianyou looked out from the stronghold, where barracks after barracks were erected. They were orderly and strict, and the atmosphere was somber. When a most important batch of resources arrived, he did not stop and ordered the army to enter the desolate continent. To prevent his path of retreat from being cut off, he arranged for Oliver's army to guard the Star Door. When Oliver was imprisoned, his army also suffered calamity, and the matter with the Western traders had once again sent the army to hell. With the tense situation, Time was extremely precious, and what he was most afraid of was a tug of war. Just at that moment, Du Xianyu's face changed. She raised her head and stared straight at the barracks in front of them. Duca, who was beside her, also became serious. Chapter 874. The exhausted Thunderball martial artist was quickly pulled to the back by his companions. In that attack, he had completely exhausted the power of his lost surface. However, this action of his was like a fuse that ignited the entire battlefield. Martial artists continued to rush forward and unleash their full power attacks. Luckily, the Sin Domain martial artists were fighting alone. If they were proficient in armies, that would truly be troublesome. But at that moment, he suddenly realized that there were too many scouts around. When the unbreakable legend revealed a crack, the hatred and bloodthirstiness hidden deep within the Sin Domain martial artists erupted like a volcano. But very quickly, he knew that the enemy was not weak. Colin sensed danger. His own side's morale was unstable, and if the battle situation was disadvantageous, they would most likely collapse. He was shocked. Could it be that the scouts are the enemy's true target? The dense energy caused the soldiers to cheer. It was the feeling that they were familiar with, the rhythm that they were familiar with. They started to perform crazily. All sorts of attacks were unleashed, like raindrops, whizzing out from the barracks towards the stronghold. Although they did not know what methods the enemy used to cause the desolate continent's energy to become so sparse, but since it was sparse, they had to increase it. Colin thought about star rocks. High-grade star rocks were not rare in the Sacred Saint Galaxy, and were usually used on warships. Colin then thought about the warship's smelting furnace upon testing it out. The results were extremely good. The only flaw was that it wasted star rocks. Between experts, there was always an unspeakable tacit understanding. After the continuous crazy attacks, the energy barrier started to reveal minute cracks. A Sin Domain martial artist who trained in spatial laws suddenly had his eyes lit up and his figure suddenly disappeared. They saw the hope of victory, and nothing made them more excited and crazy. They suddenly realized that against the honorable Martial Continent's army, they did not have a chance. The countless of corpses in front of the Sin Gate had deeply ingrained the legend of the honorable Martial Continent into the hearts of every Sin Domain person. And outside of the barracks, there were heavy guards with a thick energy barrier preventing the enemy scouts from taking advantage of the situation. Colin used half of his military strength to set up a defensive line, creating an extremely sturdy tortoise shell. Colin had mobilized an astonishing number of star stones from the rear. As soon as the battle began, the star stones were thrown into the furnace like they were free. Colin had made ample preparations. Star stones were piled up like a mountain in the barracks. Soldiers were constantly pouring boxes after boxes of star stones into a furnace. Surging energy gushed out from the furnace. This furnace was a core component dismantled from a medium-sized warship. Its purpose was to release the energy within the star stones for the warship to use. Lunatic, Colin was a little confused. He was stunned by the scene in front of him. He had never seen such a crazy attack. He was not anxious at all. As though the army did not know fatigue, they took turns to attack. As for the star stones, he had made ample preparations. All the star stones in the warehouses, barracks, and merchant associations along the way had been seized by him. He had so many star stones that he could fight continuously for a month. A fugitive. The other party was merely relying on a sense of bravery to hold on. The Sin Domain martial artist revealed a sinister smile. The blood feud with the honorable Martial Continent had long seeped into their blood. When the battle started, both sides had casualties. Colin's army was well trained and guarded, but in the honorable Martial Continent, when had there ever been such an intense battle? When had they ever seen such a terrifying enemy? Even Colin himself was shocked, much less the soldiers. Colin calmed down and prepared to give the enemy a fatal blow. That is, Colin did not even have the time to heave a sigh of relief. He suddenly realized that not only did the situation not calm down, but it became even more tense. Colin's eyes constricted. Colin's mind became vexed, but he knew that it was not the time to be vexed. The most important thing was to stabilize the situation. The enemy's frenzied and fearless attacks had a huge impact on the soldiers. Over 100 lightning balls struck onto a single point like rain. Dazzling light auras blossomed, causing the nearby soldiers to be blinded by white light. All of the Sin Domain scouts outside the barracks suddenly started to attack the formation. Every small team of scouts would definitely have a powerful expert. In such a close-distance battle, Colin finally experienced the true destructive power of the Sin Domain's powerful martial artists. One after another, demonic, godlike figures soared into the sky, and all sorts of light auras from laws lit up the sky above the desolate continent. One of the Sin Domain martial artists' eyes suddenly flashed with a fierce look. The power projected from his law surface surged forth, and over 100 watermelon-sized lightning balls suddenly appeared around him. The blue lightning balls released an extremely dangerous aura. The terrifying power of laws caused the space around them to distort. The stronghold was enveloped by Colin's army's crazy bombardment. The explosions were extremely concentrated. Colin's thoughts were simple. As long as he had enough star rocks, he could completely destroy the Sin Door stronghold bit by bit, and force the enemy to take the initiative to attack him. And by waiting for them to exhaust themselves, he could firmly grasp the initiative in the battlefield. As long as they had sufficient energy, Colin's army's training and fighting capabilities were immediately displayed. Both parties were shocked by each other's attacks. The initially frenzied Sin Domain scouts became even more frenzied. In the next moment, he appeared in the enemy's formation like a specter, and in that moment, 7 to 8 blood arrows flew into the sky, and a few of the soldiers' throats had extremely thin blood marks. To the rich and imposing temple, wastage was never a problem. At the start, Colin's army was extremely unfamiliar with such a strange and weird attack method, and thus suffered heavy losses. The lightning and fire rain attacks were still manageable, as the energy barrier could still block them. But for spatial laws attacks, they were extremely strange and unpredictable. The enemies were like moths flying into flames. They attacked the energy barrier without caring about anything. Some even used their bodies to strike the energy barrier. Every one of them only unleashed one attack. If it was light, they would be exhausted. If it was heavy, they would be heavily injured. Seeing the fellows who had lost their fighting capabilities being dragged away by their comrades, their faces that were covered in blood revealed maniacal smiles, which contained a bone-deep hatred, causing Colin's heart to feel a chill. Colin was the first to react and bellowed, "Kill him." Colin quickly made a decision. Defend first. Stabilize the situation. Lightning, fire rain, squalls, spatial slashes. Their attack methods were extremely strange. They did not have any energy, but had astonishing might. Colin heaved a sigh of relief. The current situation was similar to what he had guessed. Their speed was as fast as lightning, their figures like ghosts. Their repeated attacks, some of them suddenly appeared outside the energy barrier. Some of them even directly attacked the energy barrier. The distance between both parties was extremely close, to the point that they could see each other's sinister faces. Many of the soldiers were affected, their movements became messy, their synchronization dropped to varying degrees, and the energy barrier became unstable. Colin knew that the biggest obstacle in the battle was the terrain. The thin energy would make it extremely difficult for them to fight, but at the same time, it would increase the enemy's strength. Just at that moment, he saw the crowd of people outside the energy barrier suddenly split apart, revealing a path. Colin's face was stern as he bellowed at his soldiers. He believed that as long as they did not panic, the enemy would definitely not be able to break through their energy barrier. The energy barrier formed by the army was enough to defend against the attacks from warship weapons. No matter how strong the enemy were, Colin did not believe that they could break through their energy barrier. Colin did not have any intention to advance to the bottom of the city and fight with the Sin Domain. He split the army into a few groups and took turns to attack the stronghold from afar. He even specially removed the warship weapons from a few warships, as the powerful warship weapons gave Dooku and the rest an immense pressure. Indiscriminate bombardment. The Sin Domain scouts who were glaring at the side were like tortoises that had shrunk into their shells, with nowhere to attack. Even Colin was shocked by the sudden light aura, but the intense trembling of the energy barrier caused his heart to jump to his throat. But as both parties became familiar with each other, Colin's army started to gain the upper hand. Compared to long-range attacks, Colin's army held a greater advantage. Colin's army was most familiar with long-range attacks, while the Sin Domain was at a disadvantage, as there were not many energy laws that could engage in long-range battles. Colin looked at the Sin Domain martial artist floating in the sky and revealed a look of shock. The undulations released by the Sin Domain martial artist in the sky were truly terrifying. Although he had long known that the Sin Domain martial artists were extremely powerful, but personally witnessing it, it still gave Colin a huge shock. They were like a tide, pouncing towards the honorable martial continent's formation from all directions, all of them in a frenzy. Initially, Colin did not think much of it, as he had specially set up defenses against the scouts. But the Sin Domain scouts' attack had exceeded his expectations. They did not have a strict organization, and were like a pack of wolves, forming groups of 3 to 5, continuously attacking the formation. The powerful martial artists of the Sin Domain grew up in an extremely cruel environment, and every martial artist with a bit of fame had experienced countless of battles and killings. And the martial artists on the list had crawled out from a pile of corpses. Maybe they did not have any attainments in battle formations, but their understanding of battles and their acute sense of opportunities was definitely not something a military general like Colin could imagine. The Sindor stronghold was also the first to retaliate. The soldiers behind the energy barrier had never seen such a terrifying enemy before, and their eyes were filled with fear. The dense energy inside the formation greatly affected the Sin Domain martial artist's strength, but he was still extremely ferocious. He was like a ferocious beast, and after continuously killing over 10 soldiers, he was killed by the swarm of sword and spear auras. But very quickly, Colin knew that his understanding of the Sin Domain was still too shallow. He was prepared to increase the strength of his defense, and gave up on attacking the stronghold, and first deal with the surrounding enemies that were like a tide. With such a dense group of people, they only needed a few volleys to cause the enemy to suffer heavy casualties. The energy barrier that Colin thought was sufficiently sturdy was in imminent danger, and he knew that he had missed out on something before the battle. But he did not have the time to think about it. He had no choice but to mobilize a portion of his forces and increase the number of people maintaining the energy barrier. Martial artists who had gained enlightenment on the lost surface, upon unleashing their full strength, would be extremely powerful and terrifying. Chapter 875. The so-called stronghold was just a pretense. The true killing move was the opponent's army. The other side was very cunning. From the beginning, they had sent out a large number of scouts to kill their own scouts. He wanted Colin to get used to the existence of the Sin Domain scouts, and only then could he numb Colin. Everyone's breathing was heavy, their eyes were red, and a strange feeling that they had never felt before rose in their hearts. Someone's entire body was covered in electricity. The electricity was as thick as an arm and wrapped around the Golden Palace like snakes. Someone's arms seemed to be hugging each other. The space within was slightly concave, and a terrifying wind, I whimpered. Wind blades circled around the palace. Someone's entire body was emitting an extremely cold frost that spread along the Golden Palace. Why? No one expected Du Xinu to use Tactic 9 right from the start. Not even Du Ke. But in the Sin Domain army, Du Xinu held absolute authority, and even Du Ke had to listen to her commands. The palace silently crashed into the energy barrier. Countless people were still fighting to be the first. The golden light aura beneath Du Ke's feet quickly expanded outwards and instantly enveloped the entire Sin Domain army. It was as though the Sin Domain army was standing on a pool of gold liquid. Countless of gold light surged out from the ground, strand after strand. With astonishing speed, they formed illusory outlines in the air. And that fortress, yes, they were indeed the rulers. They were responsible for the final blow. The other party was even more brilliant than he thought. All the light in the sky seemed to be swallowed up, becoming its best curtain. The roars and shouts that resounded throughout the battlefield suddenly disappeared. Time seemed to stop at this moment. The air became solid, and the energy stopped flowing. An army. And the one who launched the fatal attack was the Sin Domain army. For these geniuses who grew up in the region, it was normal for them to risk their lives. In the cruel Sin Domain, to survive, one had to risk their lives. Compared to this, what was the point of risking one's life in training? Colin was certain that Sanctum would not make a mistake on such an important issue. Out of all the information he had come across, the one that was mentioned the most was the Sin Domain's fighting style. The Sin Domain only knew how to fight one-on-one. They did not have any armies. And in the information, they had analyzed the reason for that. The crisp sound of glass shattering rang in everyone's mind. Dooku suppressed the excitement in his heart. He did not expect the battle to be so intense. He ran to the Sin Domain and mobilized everyone, hoping to reinforce the desolate continent. It was out of his expectations that so many people would come, and it was even more out of his expectations that everyone would risk their lives. No one knew better than him that in the past 300 years, the honorable Martial continent had left an undefeatable shadow in the hearts of the Sin Domain people. In the past 300 years, the piles of corpses in front of the Sin Door had long scattered the fighting spirit of the Sin Domain people. They all understood. The Golden Palace seemed to have been painted with gorgeous colors, and it was gorgeous and flowing with colors. The Sin Domain army was currently in a state of battle. Colin's mind was extremely clear at the moment. He knew that he was going to lose this time. All of his battle plans were made to counter Sin's original fighting style. Only now did he realize how wrong he was. Almost in an instant, Colin understood many things. A breathtaking light entered Colin's field of vision. Deathly silence, a deathly silence. This is the will of the Sin Domain. This is the 300-year blood feud. This is the only hope for the Sin Domain to escape from that cage. This is the first battle for them to regain everything that once belonged to them. The Sin Domain has an army. In truth, the soldiers of the Sin Domain army did not think highly of the martial artists. But the scene in front of him shocked him. Everyone in the Sin Domain army was shocked. All of the people that they viewed as ants in the Sin Domain were fighting with their lives on the line, fighting with everything they had. Dooku was currently overwhelmed with emotions, and upon hearing Du Xinu shout for tactic number 9, he was slightly surprised, but it was exactly what he wanted. The only absolute martial artist in the Sin Domain who had gained enlightenment on a law domain, under the suppression of Tang Tian's God Armor Army. He used his deepest comprehension of laws and Du Xinu's unparalleled intelligence, as well as the strongest elites of the Sin Domain, to create the strongest killing technique. They never thought that it would be their strongest attack right from the start. Tactic number 9. Ever since she saw Tang Tian's God Armor Army's shocking tactic number 9 at the Sin Door, Du Xinu was deeply shocked and decided to create the strongest attack of the Sin Domain army. It was obvious that Temple had made a mistake. The Sin Domain must have undergone some shocking change, and Temple is completely unaware of it. It was extremely heavy, as though they were carrying something on their backs. Their weapons were tattered, their strength was mediocre, their talent was ordinary, and in the eyes of the Heavens Chosen, they were considered cannon fodder. A gold palace gradually formed, and at the same time, countless of light auras lingered around the palace. The entire Sin Domain army firmly believed that they were the rulers of the battle. An indescribable silence and pressure enveloped the entire battlefield. In time, the gold palace was filled with strange phenomena. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, frost storms blew, and space was destroyed. His heart continued to sink. He knew that he was wrong. Temple was wrong. Everyone was wrong. The hatred between the Sin Domain and the honorable Martial continent was something that they did not need to mobilize. The entire Sin Domain did not need to mobilize. Looking at the people with bloodshot eyes who looked as though they had gone crazy, every single Sin Domain army soldier felt as though there was a fire burning in their hearts. Furthermore, the enemy is the honorable Martial continent. Truly powerful, They all understood the logic that Duke had told them, as all of them were extremely intelligent. The lone stronghold was the best target. As long as they took down the stronghold, they could end the war. It was the fattest bait in the entire trap, to the point that Colin was unable to reject it. Time. What he lacked the most was time, and what Temple lacked the most was time as well. She and Dooku had spent a great deal of effort to finally form this move, and you had also named it Tactic Number 9. Colin almost thought that he was seeing things. Army. The Sin Domain actually has an army. Although he was unfamiliar with the enemy's formation and had never seen it before, the formation looked to be in a mess, but Colin was 100% sure that it was an army, a true army. One wrong step, and every step will be wrong. As long as they destroyed the enemy's large formation's energy barrier, the scales of victory would tilt to their side. Be it in close combat or in a chaotic battle, the honorable Marshall continent was definitely not their match. All of them held in their breaths, but they had never felt it as deeply as they did now. Dooku was extremely clear of this. He had never placed his hopes on others, and his actions stemmed from his unwillingness to accept it. It was a feeling that they had never felt before. In the Sin Domain, killing, fighting, survival, that was what everyone was most familiar with. And fighting for survival, that was the feeling they were most familiar with. All of the Sin Domain martial artists were temporarily mobilized by Dooku from the Sin Domain. How many people did Dooku mobilize? No one knew. Even Dooku himself did not know. Everyone only saw family after family, tens of thousands of martial artists, walking out of the Sin Door and entering the desolate continent. In the chaotic battlefield, everyone stopped what they were doing. They stared blankly at the majestic and solemn palace in the sky. The intense battlefield suddenly quietened down. An indescribable pressure enveloped the entire place. Even the active energy in the formation had become sluggish, to the point that it was almost frozen. In the next moment, the sky-shattering cheers and shouts of killing suddenly sounded out, like the raging waves of the ocean, engulfing him. But when they saw the ordinary martial artists, the cannon fodder that they would never even look at in the past, were so crazy and reckless. Every single one of them were like that. They completely disregarded the consequences of their life, risking attacks. And in the Sin Domain, such attacks were rarely seen. But in the surging tide of people, every single one of them were like that. Their faces were filled with fanaticism. They roared and roared, using their bodies to strike the energy barrier. As long as a crack appeared on the energy barrier, countless figures would rush in, even if they knew that they would die inside the energy barrier. Shock, an unprecedented shock. Many of them had long reached the realm of large success in their lost surface and were extremely powerful. Under Colin's incredulous gaze, the incomparably thick energy shield was truly like glass, completely shattering. Thus, Colin brought along his warship weapons and formulated a plan to attack the city. Unknowingly, they had already been led astray by the enemy. Seeing how the enemy's energy barrier was surging like a tide, Du-Xinu acutely sensed that their chance had arrived. They were arrogant and had no one in their eyes, but since the start, they had been firmly suppressed by Tang Tian's God Armor Army. The mere 200 men of the God Armor Army had a fighting strength that completely surpassed them. How could the proud sons of heaven swallow this down? Every single one of them immediately activated their own law power to the maximum. The series of arrangements were all for the sake of the most fatal attack. In her heart, Tactic Number 9 was the strongest attack. The chance for victory was here. Ping. Even the final trump card had been meticulously thought out by the enemy. Hiding amongst the scattered scouts, they used the frantic attacks of the scouts to create an opportunity. Everyone was fighting with their lives on the line. Without hesitation, she shouted with all her might, "Tactic Number 9. They trained frantically, incomparably frantic. It was not only him. Du-Xinu was also extremely excited. She was not only excited because of everyone's bravery, she was even more excited because she saw the hope of victory. All of this was arranged by her, and in her plans, the ordinary martial artists were only there to hide the tracks of the Sin Domain army. But she never thought that the ordinary martial artists would be able to display an effect that far exceeded her expectations. But regardless of how powerful the light auras were, the Gold Palace remained unmoved because it was Dooku's law domain. All of these characteristics were what the enemy wanted them to see. As expected, Colin quickly saw through the scouts. They were individually strong, but lacked organization and were not proficient in battle formations. With their numbers, as long as Colin maintained the formation, the scouts would not be able to shake the formation and were nothing to fear. The proud sons of heaven of the Sin Domain army were completely shocked. The Sin Domain army that Dooku had formed was comprised of the strongest and most talented people in the entire Sin Domain. Even Tang Tion's God Armor army could not be compared to Dooku's Sin Domain army in terms of individual qualities. It could be said that Dooku's army was the most elite in the entire Sin Domain. Chapter 876. Kai-Si said faintly, "Furthermore, we are sinners and will fight even harder." The two of them stood up and looked at each other, both of them seeing the seriousness and caution in each other's eyes. To the current them, they could not afford to lose anymore. Stop dreaming. Go ahead and be jealous. The ruined Honorable Marshal's roar is so tempting. The gigantic hull was filled with bulging things. They were very light, and when the wind blew, they would sway. Furthermore, they had all sorts of colors, looking like inflatable garbage bags. It was extremely comical. The windows were obviously newly added. They were actually lazy to the point that they did not even paint them. Gute, who had good eyesight, could even see the burrs and curls. And also, were those things that looked like building blocks. But now, the scouts said that they had discovered an ultimate army warship flying towards them. It's coming from the warship's cemetery. Seeing Gute's confused face, he explained, "The legendary warship Honorable Marshal's roar is buried in the warship's cemetery." The two warships were laughing non-stop. The ruined Honorable Marshal's roar. They felt that Gute's description was too apartment. The captains of the other warships were jealous of the two warships' good luck. It was their first achievement in the war. The cloud-swallowing ship and the Northlight ship had truly picked up a huge bargain. Kai-Si explained, "According to what I know, the current frontline forces are stretched thin, and a shortage of manpower is extremely serious. Furthermore, the situation at the front lines is not good. Master Gocheng Wondao, Master Chiu Suhua, and Master Mo Xen are all in trouble." Oliver's entire army was extremely relaxed. The atmosphere in the army had been terrible recently, and the ruined Honorable Marshal's roar had given everyone a lot of joy. Even Kai-Si and Gute had a smile on their faces. This was a happy interlude. "Relax." Gute patted his chest loudly. He was extremely heroic. "Whoever dares to find trouble, I will definitely beat them until they piss their pants." Oliver being imprisoned was a calamity for the army. The two of them still held onto a trace of hope, since Master Oliver was hailed as someone with great military contributions and had the chance to make a comeback. But this time, Temple's military strength was extremely tight, and Temple still did not use Master Oliver. The two of them completely understood that Master Oliver had no hope. Suddenly, the alarm went off. Maybe they're running out of food. Gute rubbed his chin. They can only take the risk and fight for their lives. "Yeah, that's right. Why are they flying towards us?" Kai-Si didn't say anything. His usually spirited eyes were filled with confusion. "Definitely a bunch of poor pirates." Gut added, "Very poor." Keith laughed out loud. He was teasing him on purpose. He knew Gute too well. This guy was a battle maniac. If he didn't fight a few times a day, he would feel uncomfortable all over. He could retire and live a leisurely life. After all, he had earned quite a lot of money from Lord Oliver over the past few years. He knew that Gute would never retire. A leisurely life would only stifle this guy. Is this Honorable Marshal's roar?" Gute stuttered. He was shocked by the crudeness of the other party's construction. With a casual glance, Gute found several places that were wrong, full of mistakes. He had never seen such a shoddily built ship. It refreshed his understanding of the lower limits of craftsmanship. Even if the other party had modified the Honorable Marshal's roar, an antique that had been scrapped for hundreds of years, Gute still had the feeling that the Honorable Marshal's roar was being ruined. That's right. In the future, Please call me the man who sank the ultimate army warship. You guys can only watch from the side. Haha, that feels great. The two of them could not help but sink into silence. That's possible. The Honorable Marshal's roar's main structure is extremely sturdy. We are doing this for your own good. Whatever name we change has nothing to do with us. Gute forced a smile. We will complete this mission properly. Even if we don't have any merits, we will still have our hard work. As long as we are not sent to a place where even birds don't shit, I will be satisfied. Gute nodded his head in agreement. This is truly unbearable. Seems like we have to help them. Cloud swallowing ship, Northlight ship, go and destroy this Honorable Marshal's roar that has been ruined, and help them in their suffering. Ultimate Army warships were the overlords of warships. They were the strongest warships, and any Ultimate Army warship was a gold-grade warship. Ultimate Army warships could not be bought in the market, and in the entire Sacred Saint Galaxy, the number of shipyards that had the ability to manufacture Ultimate Army warships could be counted with one's fingers. They were extremely expensive to build and required countless of precious materials. Even the rich and imposing Honorable Marshal continent, with their entire continent strength, were only able to build 5 of them. Yes, they have all been sent out. There are no abnormalities. Kai Si said without turning his head. Compared to the tall and sturdy Gute, he was much skinnier. But no one would look down on him because of that. In Oliver's army, his position was not inferior to Gute. Have the scouts been sent out? Honorable Marshal's roar. Gute then understood and relaxed. You are talking about that antique warship. Did they modify the Honorable Marshal's roar? Huh, what a joke. Who would think of such a stupid idea? It is just a scrapped antique. Do you think it can be used after some modifications? Kai Si's perplexed eyes became clearer, and he scoffed. You can go and train the new soldiers. The war will not end so quickly, and everyone needs to replenish their manpower. For a commander of your level, if you are willing to go and train the new soldiers, no one will go against you. Hey, this ship is so big. Can the two of you with your small bodies handle it? We are extremely happy to help you. It is enough for us to fight. Gute said without hesitation. His eyes lit up and regained his fighting spirit. Kai Si seemed to have thought of something and suddenly asked, Which direction are they coming from? This is our last chance, Yang Kai said. Gute sighed. He looked at the war flag and sighed. I reckon that the flag will have to be changed. I wonder what it will be called. Without hesitation, Kai Si immediately ordered the entire army to be on guard. Let's go take a look. Gute said, Warship Cemetery. Kai Si was enlightened. I understand. The Warship Cemetery truly has an ultimate army warship. He had heard of some news, but did not expect it to be so serious. In the eyes of the Honorable Marshal Continent's people, the 5 great generals were invincible existences. Among the Honorable Marshal Continent's generals, it was the same. Gute and the rest understood that it was not easy to rise to the rank of a great general. If it was said that a lieutenant general could still gain experience, it was definitely impossible to become a great general. What kind of warship is that? The current Whitefields continent was a desolate scene. There were no signs of human habitation. Only the star door that led to the desolate continent was bustling with activity. All right, it is a miracle that the ship is able to fly. 2 middle-sized warships separated from the group and flew towards the ruined Honorable Marshal's roar. Gute's expression was obvious. If not for the few scouts reporting at the same time, he would have thought that the man was speaking nonsense. If they did not know that it was the Honorable Marshal's roar, no one would be able to link the broken and tattered garbage ship with the legendary Honorable Marshal's roar. Out of caution, Kai Si and Gute decided to go take a look. Gut sat down beside Keys and asked casually. He had a head of short brown hair, a robust body, and an aggressive nature. When Oliver was still around, he was Oliver's right-hand man. We need to complete our mission first, Kai Si reminded. We need to display our fighting strength to the higher-ups. But this speed is as slow as a tortoise. With a group of warships docked here, it was a spectacular sight. The star door was narrow, making it difficult for large and middle-sized warships to pass through, The small-sized warships had limited defense and could be easily broken through. Gute took in a cold breath. How can this be? Even the three great generals are unable to defeat the enemy? Oliver's army's war flag was raised high. The encampment was extremely strict. After laughing, Kai-Si then said, "Relax, it's not like we don't have a chance." Kai-Si was somewhat sympathetic, so pitiful. That's right. Free help. How about it? If you guys can't kill them, how embarrassing would that be? Gute's eyes lit up. He trusted Kai-Si and immediately leaned forward. Quickly tell me, what chance do we have? The ruined honorable marshal's roar was truly a different scene. Gute was brave. Kai-Si was good at scheming. The two of them had been partners for many years and had a tacit understanding with each other, as though they were brothers. Kai-Si also felt that it was inconceivable. The honorable marshal's roar had been scrapped in the warship cemetery for a few hundred years, and there were actually people who had ideas on such a useless old antique. I do not know the exact details. Kai-Si continued. If it is true, then to us, it might be an opportunity. If the front lines are not in a pinch, then we will definitely be broken up and be replenished by other armies. But if the front lines are in a pinch for an army like ours, as long as we are sent to the front lines, we will be able to display our usefulness. Temple will definitely not do such a thing at such a critical juncture. The other warship captains immediately started to ridicule them. Kai-Si, who was dumbstruck, blurted out, "Pirates!" When Gute heard the report from the scouts, he had a strange expression. What? Ultimate army warship? Are you sure you are not mistaken? Kai-Si agreed with Gute's words. He stared at the garbage ship and asked, "Then why are they flying towards us?" That's right. Gute firmly believed in his deduction. To be so desperate, to find a ship that had been scrapped for a few hundred years to modify. How poor are they? Pirates were always willing to spend money on things that could save their lives. How poor are they? All those red and green garbage bags. To not even let go of the garbage bags. How poor are they? The welfare and treatment of the local armies had a huge difference. The more remote and desolate the place, the worse the welfare and treatment. Gute's eyes became brighter and brighter. Hey, now that you mention it, it might be possible. It was the most logical guess that he could think of. The two warships did not show any signs of weakness. Train the recruits? Gute's face turned green. Definitely not. If I have to look at those recruits every day, I will definitely go crazy. When the two of them saw the ultimate army warship from the scouts, their expressions became completely sluggish. The two of them had followed Master Oliver for many years and could be considered as Oliver's true trusted aides, and it was difficult for others to accept them. They were already considered lucky that they were not implicated by Master Oliver. Their most probable way out was to be transferred to a local army and then quietly grow old. This army would also be broken up and divided by other armies, and such elite soldiers were still welcomed by other armies. Chapter 877. The dazzling rain of light covered every corner of their field of vision. After a moment of brilliance, everyone's eyes became a vast expanse of whiteness. They were previously intimidated by the ultimate army warship's terrifying offensive power, and after hearing the two generals' words, their thirst for victory was ignited. Yes, although the enemy was strong, they had the advantage of numbers. Bang! He knew that he was not the only one thinking. The entire Null Division had the same thoughts. At the moment, the Null Division members inside the warship were filled with nervousness, excitement, worry, all sorts of emotions, but the harsh training allowed them to maintain their composure. Seeing the enemy warship getting closer and closer, inside the Honorable Marshal's roar, all sounds disappeared, and it became extremely quiet. The warship fell into a brief and strange silence. To any warship, the importance of the energy shield was greater than the warship's weapons. Without an energy shield, the survivability of a battleship on the battlefield was almost zero. The sound of the explosion was deafening. It was so concentrated that it was like a storm of heavy punches. The hull of the ship was like a sandbag, shaking like a sieve. The balls of flames were like demonic flowers of death in full bloom. He took a few steps forward in a daze, to the edge of the deck and looked through the opening at the whole field of battle. Niechio's orders drew the curtains to the battle. Once he got out of his pessimistic state, Kaisi's mind immediately began to spin. The enemy's attack power is very strong. Let's spread out and disperse the enemy's firepower. The enemy's battleship doesn't have an energy shield, so its defense should not be high. This is our chance. No matter what, they could not lose to the monster battalion. An intense pain came from his back, and he could barely straighten his back. Something had smashed into his forehead, and something seemed to be dripping down. In the face of such terrifying firepower, the ridicule and wanton teasing just now with the sarcasm of the Grim Reaper. Niechio, who was born in the Leo constellation, had sought refuge with Tang Tian because he did not have the opportunity. Tang Tian did not discriminate against him and entrusted him with a heavy responsibility. He knew how difficult it was. It was not an empty saying that a gentleman would die for his bosom friend. The honorable marshal's roar in front of them had changed beyond recognition. It was a complete mess. The hull was severely damaged, and the energy barrier could not be used. That was also the reason why the honorable marshal's roar had remained dormant in the warship graveyard for hundreds of years, but no one had any ideas about it. It should be bleeding. Beside him, Gute held his head in his hands, unable to believe his eyes. However, the two huge fireballs on the battlefield reminded him of what had just happened. The explosion was not as bright as the enemy's volley, and the captain of the Cloud Devourer's vision gradually recovered. A cold light flashed in Kaisi's eyes. The battle had just begun. Attack! This extremely ugly garbage ship was actually a true Ultimate Army warship. The bulk of the Null Division was made up of the Lupus race that were loyal and devoted to Tang Tian and Amauri. Han Bingning and the rest were even Tang Tian's companions in the past. Everyone knew very well how powerful their enemy was. This was a warship without an energy shield. The newly added structure of the ship was full of mistakes, and it was impossible to construct a complete energy shield. These 6 words were like thunder exploding in his mind, and his body involuntarily trembled. Yes, an Ultimate Army warship. It was definitely an Ultimate Army warship. He had been a captain for 16 years, and would definitely not be wrong. Such a terrifying offensive power could only be achieved by an Ultimate Army warship. The bow of the Cloud Devourer ship had completely disappeared. The gale surged in, causing the flames behind him to burn even more intensely. The crackling sounds of the flames could be heard. Inside the flames, screams could be heard as soldiers covered in flames continuously jumped down from the warship. The charred and broken deck beneath his feet was covered in blood. The sturdy hull had scars that looked like paper being torn apart. It was a ghastly sight. The space in front of him was empty. The broken hull and him were exposed to the air. It must be known that even their startling-looking warship was pieced together from all over the place, and was a piece of junk that was dug out from the trash heap, although it had undergone modifications. But as for its might, even Sai Lei did not know. Can I escape? The captain of the Cloud Devourer ship laughed bitterly. His face that was covered in smoke was filled with despair. Gute inhaled cold air. His entire body turned cold. He suppressed the intense fear in his heart and forced himself to remain calm. Seems like we have met with a huge problem. All right, the Cloud Devourer ship is no different. In that moment, the attack released by the garbage ship was definitely of an Ultimate Army warship grade. But at that moment, he could not be bothered to check on his own injuries. There was only endless fear in his heart, causing his mind to buzz. Many people nodded their heads. Energy barriers were not like warship weapons. They only needed to be added on. To a warship, defense was much more technical than offense. The energy barrier of the warship was not activated by the crew members, but carved on the hull itself. He did not know of Tang Tian's entire plan, but he could see that the Master's plan was not a small matter. He did not wish for the Master's plan to fail because of the Null Division. That was something he could not accept. Under Zhong Li Bai's lead, the monster army had fought a series of beautiful battles, causing the Null Division to hold their breaths. When the Null Division was flaunting their might in the past, the monster army was still a group of bandits. Ultimate Army warship. Behind them, Kai-Si and Gu-Ti's faces were pale white. The two of them were stunned by the scene in front of them. Nietchio was clear that every single army, every victory or defeat, could possibly have a huge impact on the entire war. They were in the enemy's territory, and if they were careless, they would be completely wiped out. And if they were able to win the battle, the enemy's military strength would be further reduced, and the originally insufficient military strength would become even more critical. The captain of the Cloud, swallowing ship, froze. Before he could even shout out the word attack, his voice was engulfed by the boundless light aura, as though the Cloud, swallowing ship had crashed into a mountain. The entire body of the ship trembled. The immense force caused him to feel as though he was struck by a wild beast. He instantly lost his balance and was flung out. Gu-Ti's voice was extremely loud, and everyone in the warship could hear it. It was a formless pressure. Suddenly, Gu-Ti patted his shoulder, causing him to raise his head in a daze. The ridicule towards the garbage ship made Kai-Si feel that he was extremely stupid. He had never thought that there would be a day where he would be so stupid. The intense fear made the feeling even clearer. Other than victory, there is no other way out. This is a true ultimate army warship. Kai-Si's body trembled. He immediately reacted and was filled with self-blame. What's wrong with me? Why did I lose my fighting spirit? He looked at Gu-Ti with gratitude and spoke loudly. That's right. No matter how powerful they are, they only have one warship. We have so many warships. As long as everyone works together, we will definitely win. A dazzling rain of light blossomed in front of the soldiers of Oliver's army without any warning. When he saw the Northlight ship, a thick pillar of light shot into the hull of the Northlight ship, destroying everything in its path. 2 seconds later, a dazzling light blossomed inside the warship. Light blue flames spewed out from the windows on both sides of the warship, as well as the gaps. Ultimate Army Warship, Kai-Si muttered, his voice trembling. In just one strike, the Cloud-swallowing ship was split into two and completely lost its fighting spirit. The calm before the storm. It was not only him. Everyone's faces were filled with killing intent. Gu-Ti felt his blood boiling, the fighting intent in his body roaring. He suddenly raised his arms and shouted, "Kill them!" Many of the soldiers' dim eyes lit up. The suffocating beauty was filled with a fatal killing intent. Inside the honorable marshal's roar, he knew that his judgment was accurate, but it did not change the situation at all. The Cloud-swallowing ship was a medium-sized warship in front of an ultimate army warship and had no way to resist. Both parties were on completely different levels, regardless of whether it was in terms of offense or defense. He felt that he was like a lamb in front of a tiger. He did not know how to retaliate or how to escape. It was as though he could see traces of blood on the sharp teeth. The endless fear almost swallowed him, causing his body to tremble even more. Gu-Ti shouted, "Don't be disheartened. No matter how powerful an ultimate army warship is, they only have one. We still have a chance." Is that the ultimate army warship? With that last sentence, Kai-Si's fist smashed onto the table, his face sinister. Everyone held their breaths, their eyes wide open, as though they were facing a great enemy. All of them were experienced in battles, but at that moment, they were extremely nervous. In the past battles, most of them used methods that they were familiar with. Even in the Sin domain, there were many tactics that they were not familiar with, but were still within their comprehension. But a warship battle was completely different from their past battles. It was a completely new way of fighting. After we scatter, we will rush towards them from all directions. As long as one warship is able to enter our firing range, they will be finished. The bodies of the warships were filled with trash bags that fluttered in the wind, although they did not know what was inside. But no one felt that the fluttering things had any defensive capabilities. Whoosh, the Null Division members who were long prepared all straightened their backs, all of their eyes revealing light. As though they were ferocious tigers that were about to be released, killing intent pervaded out from the warship. When he saw the hellish scene in front of him, he was stunned. It was the motivation to compete. In the stifling silence, Nietchio's eyes flashed with a bright light aura. He said, "Prepare to attack." upon modification, the original energy barrier would be destroyed, and the Honorable Marshal's roar's main body was one body that could not be modified. Thus, there was no point in modifying it. Everyone roared out, "Kill them!" The captain of the cloud, swallowing ship, who had just awoken from a dream, shouted out, "Enemy!" He knew how terrifying the blue flames were, and only when the star rocks inside the warship were ignited would they be able to form the blue flames. Its temperature was extremely high, and no one could stop it. Upon the appearance of the blue flames, it meant that the warship was completely finished, and what was more terrifying was that no one would be able to escape. All of the battle positions lit up with energy light auras at the same time, and the Honorable Marshal's roar that resembled a whale in the sea suddenly became covered with densely packed light spots. The ancient warship that had slumbered for hundreds of years seemed to have awoken from its slumber, and once again revealed its sinister claws to the world. Everyone had trained extremely bitterly and meticulously, but it was unable to remove the faint worry in everyone's hearts. Chapter 878. What kind of attack was that? Nietcho's attention had never slackened. He was born blind, but his senses were exceptionally sharp. Even the smallest changes were within his grasp. The dark world was never dull to him. It was rich and full of mysteries. The two of them were the strongest individuals in the Null Division, and were strong to the point that they could rely on their own strength to control warship weapons. In order to completely activate the combat power of the two of them, Silas spent a lot of effort. The core component of the Heavenly Dragon Eyes Frost Sword was a Draco Constellation Gold Treasure, Heavenly Dragon Sword. And the core component of the Ursa Major Heavenly Demonic Execution was the Gold Treasure of Ursa Major Constellation, the Bear Paw Cleaving Blade. The sound of explosions outside was incessant, and it was so dense that it made everyone's heart tremble. Even if they treated the Ultimate Army warships as canned food, they would not be able to fit so many soldiers. The captain's angry roar could be heard throughout the ship. The soldiers' faces were pale, and they were trembling. Before entering their firing range, they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They had no power to fight back. They prayed desperately in their hearts, praying that they could make it through this zone of death. A red saber light suddenly flew out. "We will now begin to assign the targets." Nietcho spoke quickly. Boom! The faces of the soldiers on the battleship were filled with shock. Before they could even scream, the battleship under their feet shook violently, as if it had hit a mountain. A huge force came, and their bodies flew out uncontrollably. They fell to the ground and rolled into a ball. "Understood," Han Bingning answered without hesitation. Every detail of the battlefield was reflected in Nietcho's mind. When the first warship entered his firing range, he did not react at all. Only when the fourth enemy warship entered the Honorable Marshal's roar's firing range did he suddenly raise his head. The ice-cold order stirred the killing intent that pervaded the entire warship, like a lightning that swept across the entire warship. Because the soldiers couldn't take it. When the enemy's warships dispersed like a flock of birds, he immediately understood their commander's intentions. The endless bloody light made them feel like they were in a sea of blood. Everyone put away their smiles, their expressions solemn and focused as they secretly remembered their mission. Han Bingning's face was as cold as ice. She controlled a warship weapon by herself. 36 blue light swords swam around her like a school of blue fish. This was the warship weapon that Sai Lei had specially forged for her, the Sky Dragon Frost Sword. The opponent's attack was shockingly powerful, and it was obvious that it required a lot of soldiers to control it. This grade of warship weapon would usually only be used as the main weapon of the warship. But all of Honorable Marshal's roar's attacks were actually so powerful. There was almost no pause, wave after wave, never tiring. What made Kai feel even more despair was the frequency of the enemy's warship's attacks. Ultimate Army warship grade attack power? No, I really hope this is a dream. Damn it. The captain cursed, his expression extremely ugly. He had only taken one attack, and cracks had already appeared on the energy shield. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. Could it be that their warship weapons would not cause any burden to the soldiers? A Maori, on the other hand, had an eager look on his face. He leaned forward with his arms hanging in front of him and his palms clenched, as if there was a large knife in his hands. Behind him, a red seal shaped like a bear's paw flickered. It was also a warship weapon that Sai Lei had personally forged, the Ursa Major Demonic Slash. He was waiting for orders. The others could not help but sigh. After the period of training, they were extremely familiar with the Honorable Marshal's Roar's attack power. If the defensive system that Sai Lei and Screw had created could be said to be worrying, then the offensive system that they had created was definitely extremely powerful. The Shan continent had a mature and advanced warship weapon manufacturing technology, adding 3 Spirit Cities' unparalleled metal smelting technology, with star treasures as the core components. The warship weapons created were unprecedentedly powerful. Over 10 clumps of fiery lights exploded at the same time, producing a low rumbling sound, as though a heavy hammer was hammering down on everyone's heart. The captain's entire body trembled. He who was defenseless felt his mind go blank, his expression blank. He stared blankly at the 10 clumps of fiery lights blossoming in his own fleet. The bright red, bewitching flames were like flowers of death. A small-scale warship was instantly disintegrated, and before the countless fragments could even fly out, they were engulfed by the flames. Rain of light. This word was often used to describe the fierceness of the attack, but only the people who witnessed the scene knew what it was. Although Kai Si and Gu Tei had never served on an Ultimate Army warship before, but they had a rough understanding of the offensive power of an Ultimate Army warship, as they had personally witnessed the attacks of an Ultimate Army warship. But it was definitely incomparable to the scene in front of them. The captain wiped the blood off his face and roared. Energy barrier. The situation of the energy barrier. Finally able to fight to his heart's content, Amauri felt that his entire body was brimming with energy. If it was in the past, he would have shouted out excitedly and pounced forward to kill. But after a long period of training in the army, he was no longer the rash and impulsive Amauri of the past, and was able to control his temper well. A neutral warship 10 kilometers away only saw a blur in front of them, as a blood-red light aura exploded out without any warning. Before the red blade aura could even fly out of the warship, the light aura beneath Amauri's feet erupted, as though swallowing him whole. Heavy demonic execution. A few of the stronger soldiers did not care about the pain on their bodies, and crawled up with all their might. Crazy. Go, go, go. The sinister Gu Tei was like a wild beast that was forced into a corner. He roared out, killing technique. That is their killing technique. They definitely have a weakness. All the warships in the world have a weakness. Rush over, we can win. The laughter that had just erupted suddenly disappeared. The inside of the warship became so quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping could be heard. Nietchio's voice was not loud, but it was clearly transmitted to every corner. Kai Si and Gu Ti's faces also changed. If the destruction of the cloud swallowing ship and Northlight ship proved that the Honorable Marshal's roar truly possessed the offensive strength of an Ultimate Army warship, but after personally experiencing it, they realized how wrong they were. The entire battlefield was completely enveloped in the rain of light, and he was unable to see his own warships that were slightly further away. All he could see was the light that was like raindrops. No, it was a flood of light, an ocean of light. After going through the baptism of Sin Domain's tempering, the Null Division was already an army with rich battle experience. Although they were somewhat nervous due to the new style of fighting, but after 2 volleys of fire destroyed the enemy's cloud-swallowing ship and Northlight ship, they quickly regained their composure. That was the difference between a veteran and a rookie. The veteran's understanding of battle and mental state allowed them to have a strong ability to adjust themselves on the battlefield. Their offensive strength is truly too terrifying. An Ultimate Army warship. Is that an Ultimate Army warship? The 2 warship weapons were no longer the traditional warship weapons. Not only did Sai Lei use Gold Star treasures as the core components, he had also referenced many refinement techniques of spirit treasures. Its might far exceeded everyone's expectations. The only weakness was that it was unable to weaken the attack. and thus in their usual training, Han Bingning and Amauri did not dare to use their full strength. The Null Division members who had been waiting for a long time did not hesitate at all and moved out. How many soldiers do they need? It is definitely an astronomical number. The first to move was Amauri. The red bear paw light seal behind him suddenly lit up, and countless blood lights converged onto his body. The red blood lights were like small red snakes that swam along his arms and into his palms. Amauri's clenched palms clapped together. His eyes opened wide in anger. The muscles on his entire body tensed up like dragons and snakes, and he suddenly pulled out his blade. Nietchio floated in the air, cross-legged. His empty eyes seemed to be gazing at the distant battlefield. A formless and biting cold, killing intent pervaded the Honorable Marshal's roar, causing the temperature to drop. Ultimate Army Warship. His eyes looked at the Honorable Marshal's roar in front of him. All of the warships were advancing frantically, like moths flying into a flame. They were going against the sea of light. It was not difficult to increase the number of warship weapons on the battlefield, but no one would do that. Rush. Full speed ahead. Do not stop. Definitely not. What made him even more incredulous was that such a terrifying attack was actually produced by a warship. That was why he felt that it was no longer an attack from an Ultimate Army warship, because no Ultimate Army warship could possess such a terrifying offensive strength. Kai Si felt as though he was in a bizarre dream. He had never seen a warship before, a warship weapon that he had never seen before, an attack frequency that he had never seen before, and a sea of light that he had never seen before. Kill. The captain did not know if they could rush over, but any hesitation would only cause them to die faster. But the battle had completely toppled Kai Si's common sense. Countless light auras shot out from the Honorable Marshal's roar. It was like a porcupine covered with light spikes. The captain had never seen such a terrifying scene before, and his face became as white as paper. Take note, the enemy wants to fight us at close quarters, Nietchio reminded. After the enemy has split up, they will attack us from all directions. That goes against common sense. The stronger the warship weapon, the greater the burden it placed on the soldiers. It was not that there were no stronger warship weapons, but the burden it placed on the soldiers would also reach a terrifying degree, to the point that the soldiers would not be able to recover from it. The red blade light suddenly expanded by 10 times, and inside the blood aura, the heavenly demon afterimage could be seen. The heavenly demon afterimage took a step forward, and before it landed, it disappeared. The soldier's face was filled with panic, his voice trembling. The energy barrier. The energy barrier has cracks. The brave captain looked out of the window in a daze. He saw an unforgettable scene. It is my world. Even the native craftsmen of the sacred Saint Galaxy were shocked speechless by the powerful warship weapons. Amauri scoffed. They are looking down on our attack power. Hold on. The captain knew that the situation was dire and roared out. A piece of shard had slashed his forehead, causing his entire face to be covered in blood, making him look extremely terrifying. Chapter 879. Even if Gute and Kai Si racked their brains, they would never have thought that there would actually be such a strange thing like the zero energy body in the world. The heavy demonic execution that they had obtained in the Sin domain and the laws tempering their bodies had allowed their bodies to reach an extremely terrifying state. In terms of controlling warship weapons, the Null Division was far inferior to Ku Si, Gute, and the rest. But so what? In the distance, a large army was marching. Even though they were so far away, they could still feel the terrifying scale of this army. The densely packed troops stretched as far as the eye could see. Everyone had a look of disbelief on their faces as they stared blankly at the wreckage scattered all over the ground. Apart from them, there was no one alive on the battlefield. The wreckage of the battleships could be seen everywhere. They were burnt black and were all debris. Not a single battleship wreckage could remain intact. Their inhumanly strong bodies easily made up for this weakness. It was fine if they couldn't hit their target once. They just had to hit it a few more times. In the time it took Cascut and the others to launch one attack, they could launch several attacks. This was the victory? He had to admit that this woman was very powerful. This time, he had mobilized all of the most elite forces in the Wei Yiguan continent. Mu Jixia had a bitter taste in his mouth. The operation to infiltrate the savage continent was a complete failure. Not only did he fail to kill the Perseus Empress, but he even caused the Wei Yiguan continent to fall into danger. The energy shield of the medium-sized battleship Kai-Si and Gute were on finally couldn't hold on any longer. It shattered like a glass cover. This was too illogical. Gute and Kai-Si's courage did not bother the Null Division. They only had one thought in their minds. Boom! He had interacted with the various tribes in the savage continent for decades, but had never seen such a large group. This was not a team that could be pulled together by just one or a few tribes. This was an army that could only be gathered by dozens of tribes. But the Wei Yiguan continent was an important city of the honorable Marshall continent, and Mu Jixia had spent over 10 years to build it and was definitely an impregnable fortress. The air here was thin and extremely cold, but Mu Jixia was indifferent. He was like an ice sculpture, staring into the distance, motionless. The battleship was like a blooming red flower. Death and beauty were so close. Unfortunately, that woman was not in this army. Otherwise, he would have taken her head, even if he had to risk his life. Pa. The Southern Cross Army, one of the tyrants of the three great armies of Heaven's Road. This was not the only tactical innovation brought about by the inhuman body. If Gyukai's were to enter the Honorable Marshal's roar, he would definitely be shocked to realize that the powerful warship weapons did not require more than 20 men. Oliver's army, all the warships were destroyed by them. On other warships, this was impossible. A standard 20-man battleship weapon. In the Sacred Region, it was considered a relatively weak battleship weapon. Those powerful warship weapons often required hundreds of people. Not only was it difficult to operate, the attack frequency was low, and it greatly affected the number of warship weapons installed. At the end of the journey, the warship could no longer bear the burden and completely collapsed. Hong, an unprecedentedly dazzling firelight instantly engulfed the warship. The soldiers in the warship didn't even have time to scream before they turned into ashes. They had never felt so carefree before. The load from the warship's weapons was like a drizzle to these humanoid beasts. Although they were not as strong as a Maori and Han Bingning, who could wield a warship weapon by themselves, they were still much stronger than the top of the sanctuary realm. This allowed him to completely understand that they had no way out. He did not come to the Sacred Saint Galaxy for a vacation. That woman was not a fool. On the contrary, she was an extremely powerful person. There must be a deeper meaning behind her actions. Like rain falling on a banana leaf, the concentrated sounds of collisions were heard, and fragments flew everywhere. In the blink of the eye, the warship became a beehive, filled with densely packed holes. Screams and pools of blood flowed out from the holes. It was a ghastly sight. But in front of them, there were only fragments. Mu Jixia could not understand why. Normally speaking, for a top-grade army with similar strength, unless there was a deep hatred between them, after probing a few times, both parties would tacitly leave. The only result of pestering was that both parties would suffer. Truly a ghost that refuses to go away. Nietzsche also noticed this point, so, in his usual training, he never asked for accuracy, but for synchronization. The synchronization of attacks could form a rain of attacks, causing the enemy to be unable to escape. The lethality would not decrease, but instead become stronger. Accuracy would not be important. Or they would step on the corpses of the Southern Cross Army and return to the Wei Yiguan continent. The Sea of Light disappeared, and so did the fleet. Both parties had fought for more than 10 rounds, and were evenly matched. Both parties had suffered heavy losses and were extremely fatigued. But the enemy did not have any intention of giving up, and continued to chase and pester them. He sensed a trace of danger. Something must have happened in the honorable Marshall continent. He did not know what exactly happened, but everything in front of him indicated that something was amiss. That woman has not unified the savage continent yet. Why would she suddenly gather people to attack the Wei Yiguan continent? When he saw the enemy's war flag again, he finally recalled where he had seen it before. What he needed to do now was to immediately return to the Wei Yiguan continent. Mu Jixia was 100% sure that the army in front of him came from someone. The zero-energy bodies were able to endure far more load than ordinary soldiers. Not only could they increase the frequency of attacks, they could also greatly reduce the number of people required to operate the warship weapons. That meant that the warship could be loaded with even more warship weapons. That was why Kai Si and the rest saw the Honorable Marshal's roar as a porcupine with spikes all over its body. The Honorable Marshal's roar was loaded with a large number of warship weapons, breaking the record of the Sacred Saint Galaxy's warship. But now, there was someone who could do it. Before the shattered aura dissipated, the whistling sword auras and blade auras were like sharks that had smelled blood. All of them surged forward and fiercely entered the warship. When the scout's report entered his ears, Mu Jixia took a deep breath and threw away all the distracting thoughts in his mind. Dense, killing intent surfaced in his eyes. He held onto his sword hilt and said, "Prepare for battle." Everyone was startled, and the breathing sounds on the Honorable Marshal's roar became much softer. No matter how good the training was, Nietschio did not place it in his heart. He knew that training was training, and actual combat was actual combat. No matter how beautiful the training was, once they entered actual combat, it would be a completely different matter. During the training, he was extremely satisfied with the Honorable Marshal's roar's attack power, but he never thought that the battle would be so one-sided. Inside the sea of light, regiments of fiery lights rose and fell. Even Nietschio, who was always calm, was dumbstruck. On a mountain peak in the savage continent, Kai Si's eyes dilated. No. The Null Division members were completely unaware of the shock they had brought to the enemy, just like how they did not think of the profound effect they would have on the Sacred Saint Galaxy. They were extremely focused, and all of them were immersed in the thrill of battle. The fighting strength displayed by the zero-energy bodies on the warship had far exceeded his expectations. After understanding the enemy's background and seeing the savage army heading towards the Wei Yiguan continent, Mu Jixia knew that it was not a coincidence. They're here. He needed to re-evaluate the Null Division's strength. They were powerful, which meant that they could be of greater use. It was the Wei Yiguan continent. Regiments of fiery lights blossomed from time to time in the sea of light. Sword and blade auras that resembled a curtain of rain tore through the sky, causing whistling sounds that shook the soul. The incessant explosions were the most impassioned drumbeats in the chaotic battlefield. It was easy to imagine that the loss of the battle would definitely shake Temple. He was looking forward to how Temple would react if they knew that there was such a powerful warship in their territory. Even more warship weapons, even faster attack frequency, finally forming the sea of light that resembled a rain curtain of attacks. Attack! Attack with all their might, or die. In the chaotic land of the savage continent, such a thing had never happened before. The various tribes of the savage continent all fought for themselves, and between them, there were years of chaotic battles. Even if it was an insignificant matter, it could pull open the curtains to a war that lasted for over 10 years. No one had ever been able to unite them. No, it was in the past. No one had ever been able to. When the last regiment of fiery light was blasted into sparks, the Null Division members on the Honorable Marshal's roar finally stopped. They gasped for breath, perspiration flowing down their bodies as they looked at the quiet and empty battlefield. He had seen them before in Temple's report on Heaven's Road, and thus felt that they were somewhat familiar. But when he knew of their origins, he no longer had any thoughts of luck. This mechanical army was not any Gold Continent elites. They were Tang Tian's allies. It must be known that the keel of a mid-scale warship was extremely sturdy, and normally speaking, it was difficult to break. That was why Crane was able to borrow the warship wreckage to block Go Chung Wendao's army for so long. What made him even more inconceivable was the direction that the army was heading towards. Everyone was shocked by the destructive power of the Honorable Marshal's roar, including the Null Division members, who were equally dumbstruck. They did not doubt that the final victory belonged to them. but to be able to win so easily made them extremely surprised. A regiment of fiery light soared from the warship, and before the flames had the time to expand, a series of explosions erupted in a short period of time. That mysterious woman. A few of the members were so excited that they took off their clothes. Their faces were filled with excitement, and they released unconscious roars from their mouths. Their bronze sculpture-like robust bodies had perspiration trickling down their bodies. Not long later, their bodies were covered in mist. Their robust bodies, under the contrast of the white mist, were filled with power and beauty. Nietzsche suppressed the joy in his heart and went into deep thought. The victory was beneficial to the entire war. Although he did not know how the battle on the desolate continent was progressing, but they had already obtained victory, and as long as they held onto the Star Door, they could easily cut off Colin's path of retreat. The Honorable Marshal's roar's offensive power far exceeded his expectations. A cold intent surfaced in Mu Jixia's heart. Mu Jixia maintained that position for a full half an hour. But no one cared.